Chapter 1. To the starting line. Midoriya Inko was worried. Her son, Izuku, hadn't manifested his quirk yet, and he was almost 5 years old. She was planning on taking him to the doctors shortly after his birthday to check if he would ever manifest his quirk. She wasn't a late bloomer, but her husband Hisashi said that he didn't know he had a quirk until he was almost 7. She hoped her son got a quirk that let him be a hero because he seemed so enthusiastic about it. She was just a little confused since the doctors said that they took compulsory x-rays of her son after his birth to check if he had a hidden mutation quirk, and they said he had much denser bones and muscles than newborns usually do. What she didn't know at that time, though, was her son was having a very rough time with his supposed best friend. Izuku was facing him, shaking in his big red shoes, standing in front of another boy who was laying on the ground after getting beat up. "That's mean Kakin." His voice was shaking, but he raised his arms and spread his feet apart, taking a fighting stance. "If you keep going, I'll never forgive you," he shouted at the end, stumbling over his words slightly. Kakin stared back for a second before huffing. "Even though you're quirkless," as he spoke, he and his 2 goons behind him prepared to attack Izuku, one of the boys growing big red wings on his back, the other's fingers extending. Kakin pulled his hands up in front of him about his body width apart, his right hand closed in a fist and the other open. He slammed them together, creating a small explosion on collision, smoke drifting away. They made their approach, each of them ready to throw a fist at Izuku. "I don't want to get hit. Please don't hit me. Oh no, I'm going to get hit." His eyes were closed and his thoughts were racing as he waited for their fists to rain down on him, but they never came. He slowly opened one eye, only to see his attackers moving in slow motion. He stood up straight, now only feeling in awe at what he was seeing. He only realized after what felt like a minute that their battle cries sounded deep, much too deep for children their ages. Izuku took a look around the park they were in. He could see a bird flying out of a tree, except he could see it flap its wings in slow motion. He looked behind him to the kid he was protecting, and he could see the tears rolling down his face, moving down ever so slowly. He turned back to face Kakin, his curiosity piqued, but sated for the time being. He decided he'd try to move, expecting to be moving as slowly as everyone else, only to be surprised that he could move at his regular speed. He smiled. He had a quirk after all. Suddenly, everything was back to normal, except Kakin had stopped running, a shocked expression on his face. His goons took a few more steps before they realized that Kakin was no longer running with them. They didn't say anything, only looking at him with confused expressions on their faces. Kakin, however, was staring at Izuku, who was smiling for seemingly no reason. He couldn't understand. Why is Deku smiling? He's always crying by now. He resumed his attack, truly angry this time. Izuku snapped out of his stupor and dodged by taking a step to the side, which only angered Kakin more. It went on for an unknown amount of time until eventually, Kakin was exhausted while Izuku wasn't even out of breath. The goons from before were staring wide-eyed in shock at the event that just took place. Just as Kakin was about to get his goons to help him, his mother and her friend Inko, Izuku's mother, arrived at the park to pick them up. Izuku excitedly ran up to his mother, much faster than she anticipated, since she had only seen a blur before he was in front of her and hugging her legs. She greeted her little ball of energy and said her goodbyes to her friend, Auntie Mitsuki. About a week after the discovery of his quirk, Izuku's mother took him to a doctor to help flesh out his quirk. The doctor ran several scans to check his muscle mass and density among other things, and a couple of scans to check his bone density. The results were incredible, since he had muscles denser than most adults, and his bones were super dense due to being partly composed of an unknown material. Thinking about the accounts of what he could achieve, the doctor got Izuku to eat food while hooked up to a machine to measure how much of the caloric energy he metabolizes, which was a shockingly high number, more than double that of the average person. He did a simple test after hearing from Izuku that time seemed to slow down when he used his quirk. He had Izuku stand to the side in a large room, while at the one end a machine would shoot tennis balls to the other side, at around 60 kilometers per hour. Painted on the floor spaced apart 1 m were white lines. The doctor said he wanted Izuku to use his quirk on his mark and tell the doctor how long it took the ball to travel between 2 of the lines. He was simply astonished at the number Izuku gave him. He almost couldn't believe that child could already have a quirk this powerful. The doctor then had an idea. His curiosity was piqued. He asked Izuku to stand at the other end of the room and on his mark attempt to catch the ball. Of course, Izuku's mother was against this. Since she saw how fast that ball was moving, Izuku could die, but she relented when she saw Izuku's puppy eyes staring big and wide at her. The machine fired, and she saw the ball travel across the room, not but a blur. Her fear spiked when Izuku didn't move a muscle, despite that it had gotten close as fast as it had. She was shocked, though, when Izuku disappeared from his spot at the end of the room and appeared in front of her, holding the tennis ball out to her, grinning widely. She stared at him blankly, while the doctor was still stood next to the machine, making strangled noises in an attempt to formulate a response to the development. Deciding they had done enough testing, the doctor took them back to the office. They sat there in silence. Izuku was grinning brightly. The doctor spoke after a few minutes of silence. "I'm honestly surprised that nothing showed up earlier. This is clearly a mutation quirk since there are no signs. It could be anything else from any of the tests we've done. Did you perhaps notice anything, Ms. Midoriya?" She was quiet for a moment, thinking of a response before she said something. "After he was born, they did some tests to check if he had a mutation quirk, and we were told he had extremely dense bones. That, and over the years I have noticed that he could always run faster and for longer than the other children, both younger and older." The doctor had a contemplative look on his face. He was clearly thinking about what could have caused the boy's quirk to only act up now. Regardless, he needed to register the boy's quirk. "All I can think of is it took a certain level of maturity for it, but that doesn't apply to mutation quirks. Regardless, do you perhaps have a name for your quirk, Izuku?" The boy dropped his grin and adopted a very serious face, thinking about what to name his quirk. "Super speed? No, that's not cool at all. I can't think of anything else though. Super speed, I guess," he finally said, face squishing in disgust. The doctor and his mother chuckled. With that, he could go about his life not having to worry about being bullied for being quirkless. The next day at kindergarten, Izuku ran into the class calling out for Kaken, seemingly having forgotten about the events that helped him manifest his quirk. Kaken looked to the green-haired boy and smiled. When Izuku felt he was close enough, he started speaking rapidly. "Kaken, I have a quirk. It's so cool." Kaken, having gotten used to the boy talking quickly, managed to understand everything he said. He smirked and said, "Oh yeah? What is it? I bet it's weak because it's yours, Deku." Izuku frowned at that. "It wasn't weak at all. I can run super fast. How do you think you can be a hero with that? All you can do is run away because you're just weak, little Deku. Scared of everything." Izuku's frown only grew at the blonde's words. He wasn't sure that he wanted to be friends with Kaken anymore, suddenly remembering all the things he said happened to him at Kaken's command. He thought in silence for a while, not noticing he was using his quirk to think at super speeds. Eventually, he came to a decision. "Kaken, I don't think I want to be your friend anymore. You're really mean to me, and I don't like that. So I'm going to do what my mom did to my dad and leave you." Suffice to say, Kaken did not like the words he just heard. His face turned into an angry scowl, and his palms started lighting up with sparks. He growled, "Huh? You don't quit being friends with me. I'm better than everyone, especially you, Deku." He had caught the attention of the other children, but luckily the caretakers were busy doing something elsewhere, so he couldn't get in trouble. He lunged at Izuku, aiming his still sparking palms at Izuku's face. Izuku, on the other hand, stood still, not out of fear but out of courage, or stupidity, depends on who you ask. He just didn't want to prove No, he didn't want to prove Katsuki right. So instead of running away, he would fight. Of course, he wouldn't take the hits, since pain sucks. So, he'll dodge and hit Katsuki in the gut, in the hopes it'll deter him from continuing. So that's what he did. He threw his little fist at Katsuki after moving to the left to dodge his attack. What he forgot to do, though, was throw his punch at a normal speed rather than super speed. What he also forgot was that his denser muscles made him stronger. Him forgetting these two key pieces of information sent Katsuki flying. Or he looked like he flew anyways. He was thrown back about 2 meters before landing on his back, out of breath from the impact. There was only a stunned silence as Katsuki groaned and coughed while he tried to get air into his lungs. At some point, the caretakers came into the classroom with a crowd of silent kindergartners staring at Katsuki and Izuku. They, of course, panicked. Though Izuku wasn't silent just because he was surprised by how much power he had hit Katsuki with. He was also silently contemplating the fact he had just made himself Katsuki's sole target for bullying for the rest of his life. Izuku found every day to be too slow for him, so he started to waste time going on a quick run every morning. He didn't really need to since his quirk always made sure every part of his body he needed to run was in top condition, but he did it anyway to pass the time. He started with a nice short 10 kilometers, but found that it didn't take up enough time for him, so he bumped it up to 15 kilometers. He ran the same route and saw the same people every morning. It did suck that he didn't have any good running clothes though, and his shoes always wore through too quickly when he went super speed, so he had to keep it to jogging speed. Recently, he had started his third year of middle school, and it was good. Somehow, though, he had Katsuki in his class again. They always end up in the same class. It's like the school knows they're on bad terms and just loves to mess with them. Though it's not any real issue for Izuku, since Katsuki was far too slow to ever bother him. He was worried about something today, though. He hadn't seen his trainer at all. The man is almost always running with Izuku, so the fact he wasn't there made him think that training might have been canceled. They hadn't exchanged contact details at all, so he wouldn't be able to ask. Izuku finished with his run, going back to his room and getting dressed for school. Once he was done, he had breakfast with his mother, the two of them making casual conversation about what that day's events would likely hold. He then finished his preparations for school and walked to school. He got to an underpass of a train track, though, where there was a villain with a gigantification quirk rampaging. He contemplated dealing with it himself, but decided against it when he saw Backdraft, Death Arms, and Kamui Woods. Kamui Woods was about to contain the villain with a special move when a hero came out of nowhere and drop-kicked the villain. It turned out to be Mount Lady, a new hero making her debut. She also appeared to have a gigantification quirk, though it made her much larger than the villain she defeated. Izuku filed the event away in his mind to record and write about in his journal later. He loved analyzing heroes and their quirks so much. He continued making his way to school, deciding to pick up the pace so as not to be late. Being late would be very out of character for someone with a quirk like his now, wouldn't it? He made it to class on time, taking his seat close to the back of the classroom. He sat there waiting for his homeroom teacher, who never made it a point to be on time, to arrive and start class. Eventually, he walked in, carrying a stack of papers. The moment he got to his podium, he put the papers down and started yelling, "You guys are all third years. It's time to start thinking seriously about your futures." I would hand out these future career forms, but he grabbed the papers again, turning around and throwing them behind him dramatically as he said, "I assume you all want to be heroes." The moment he finished, every student, sans two of them, erupted into a cacophony of noise, firing of their quirks. After a few seconds, the teacher thought they'd had enough fun and began to scold them for using their quirks. Just as he had got the students calmed down, one of the aforementioned two students, Katsuki, yelled at him, "Teach, don't lump me in with these losers." He now had the attention of the whole class, so he continued as if I have anything like their crappy quirks. This definitely got on the nerves of the other students because someone shouted, "Get over yourself, Katsuki," to which he shot back, "Shut up, extras should just act like extras." It was then the teacher thought it'd be a good idea to say something. But he didn't try to get the class to calm down. He instead said something else. "Abakugo. You, of course, must be aiming for UA High School." That got the other students to shut up. They each made exclamations on how prestigious UA was, how it was difficult to get into, and that they accept almost no one. Katsuki decided it'd be a good time to take back control of the conversation. The stupid chattering of extras. I aced the mock exam. I'm the only one here with the stuff for UA. He was standing on his desk now, shouting at the top of his lungs, "I'll even surpass All Might and become the best hero out there, not to mention I'll be one of the richest people in the world." "Oh, you're also going for UA, aren't you, Midoriya?" the teacher asked. Stunned silence struck the classroom for a moment as each student turned to look at Izuku, as if he was some criminal. Then they laughed. "Huh, Midoriya? No way, you can't just run your way into the hero program." Students made exclamations of disbelief at the idea of Izuku joining the hero program, simply because they were only concerned with the fact his quirk was called super speed, not with anything it actually allowed him to do. Izuku tried to speak up, but they only got louder, except Katsuki, who was boiling with rage that Izuku even dared to think about becoming a hero. He decided he'd had enough and jumped towards Izuku, pulling his right arm back with his palm open. Izuku could see his sweat gathering in his palm, preparing to be ignited the moment it came close to Izuku. Izuku thought about possible solutions to the oncoming hothead. I could dry off his hand, that'd be funny. I could just dodge it too, but then I'd be proving them right. All right, I'll just dry off his sweat. The world slowed, so much so that time almost looked frozen. Izuku has only gotten faster with age, though it'll probably peak once he finishes high school. He grabbed a handkerchief he had on hand for something like this, and got up and walked around his desk towards the suspended Katsuki. He couldn't really reach Katsuki's hand well enough since he had jumped from off the top of a desk, so he hopped on a nearby chair and placed the cloth snugly and tightly against his palm. That's not going to stay there. I'll tape it on. So he did just that. He looked through desks until he found some, and got a sizable amount before he walked back to Katsuki, who had barely moved an inch. He took his time sticking the tape on. After all, it's not like they could prove it was him. Once his work was done, he went back to his seat, sat down, and leaned back to watch the show. Everything resumed at its regular speed. Katsuki descended, landing in front of Izuku's desk. His hand slammed down on top of it, but nothing happened except for a loud slap. Confusion took over Katsuki's features. It took a lot out of Izuku not to betray that it was him. Katsuki roared in frustration as he ripped off the handkerchief and tape from his hand. He didn't bother trying to make another explosion, instead opting to continue where he left off. You think you can stand shoulder to shoulder with me? Hadikeyu? No one said or did anything. The teacher especially didn't. His face just had, "I'm not paid enough to get blown up," written all over it. Izuku decided that he should answer Katsuki. Of course I can. Who do you think just dried up your nasty sweat for you? Izuku smirked at him. Before Katsuki could do anything else, though, the teacher decided that it was a good time to get class back on track. In the end, he did hand out the forms out of obligation to his duty as a teacher. The rest of the day was pretty normal, except that Katsuki shot him a glare more times than he could be bothered to count. Izuku had spent the last 10 minutes of class looking through some of his notes in his latest hero analysis book. So when the bell went signaling the end of school for the day, he mindlessly packed up and didn't notice Katsuki and his two lackeys. He was about to pack his notebook in his bag when suddenly it's no longer in his hands. He looks up to see Katsuki looking up to him, slightly holding Izuku's notebook in his left hand. "Give it back, Katsuki," Izuku commanded, leaving no room for argument. "What if I don't wanna?" he asked, sneering at him. "Then I'll take it back, thank you," Izuku answered, moving his hand faster than Katsuki ever could, grabbing his notebook back and quickly put it in his bag. He turned to leave only to come chest to face as one of Katsuki's lackeys attempts to block the way there. "I don't have time for this," he thought to himself as he pushed the guy out of his way. The lackey stumbled at the unexpected force, but he was out of Izuku's path before he could do anything. Before Izuku could open the door to leave, though, Katsuki slammed his hand next to it, creating a small explosion and charring the wall slightly. "Katsuki, I'm sure you have better things to do than try and threaten me into not going to UA," Izuku said, stunning Katsuki. He left before the debacle could continue. Izuku was on his way to the training location he and his trainer use, which is some dump that used to be a beach. They'd only been training a month, but they, Izuku, have already cleared about a tenth of it. Izuku was hoping his trainer was fine since no one else seemed to know how to help someone with natural super strength, even if it was only minor enhanced strength compared to people with strength enhancement quirks. Izuku decided to take a shortcut through an underpass. He was too absorbed in his thinking about what to do if his trainer wasn't there or he didn't arrive there, to realize that something was coming out of the manhole he had just walked over. It was only when he heard someone say something behind him that his attention was focused back on his surroundings, a disguise, pant and medium size. Everything slowed down to a crawl as Izuku turned to the source. He sounds tired, like he's been running. He also called me a disguise. Is this guy a villain? It'd probably benefit me to not get caught since there probably isn't much I could do against someone made of liquid. While Izuku was thinking, he was also fighting the urge to ask the apparent villain, "Are you a bad slime? Are you a bad slime?" He failed. The urge was just too strong. The villain clearly wasn't expecting to be asked a question as he stopped moving for a second, stunned. He continued onward, flinging himself at Izuku in an attempt to catch and cover him. Too bad he was much slower than him, so Izuku simply took a few steps back. "Stand still, you brat," the villain yelled at Izuku. "Now why would I do that when I can stall you until help arrives?" Izuku asked, turning to the side to dodge a disgusting dark green tendril. It was at this moment Izuku heard something else come from the manhole. It sounded like heavy footsteps. The villain screamed in frustration as the manhole cover behind him shot up and hit the ceiling of the underpass. A large silhouette jumped out and shouted, "Fear not, why? Because I am here." The villain seized up, and Izuku stared at the apparent pursuer of the villain in excitement. "All Might, I've wanted to meet him my whole life, I wonder. Is he faster than me?" As Izuku was in his head, All Might dispatched the villain with a Texas smash and was trying to get the boy's attention. What All Might wasn't expecting when he approached the kid was for him to be mumbling at what seemed to be supersonic speeds. "Kid, calm down. The villain has been apprehended." Izuku seemed to have heard him and immediately started fanboying. "Oh my god, it's All Might. Hey, All Might, what's your top speed? Actually, can I get an autograph? But really, what's the fastest you've ever run?" Izuku fired out the questions almost too fast for All Might to catch it. "Just like always, young Midoriya. You always have spoken at speeds that are rarely coherent. It's amusing sometimes. I don't know what my top speed is, young man, but I'm sure you could match it with hard work. Haha, now. I must be off to hand this villain to the police." All Might spoke as he signed Izuku's book on the first empty page he saw. He then pocketed the villain, who now resided within 2 empty soda bottles. Izuku noticed that they weren't very securely put in his pockets and decided to let All Might know so he can avoid any more incidents. He turned to All Might, who was crouched and ready to leap into the sky. "All Might, the bottles, they're not secured properly in your pockets." This caught All Might's attention, and he realized that they were indeed not secured properly and almost looked like they would have fallen out the moment he took his leap. "Thank you, young Midoriya, that could have caused many issues. Yuwa, that could have been absolutely horrible. I'm already running short on time. Who knows what that could have done." Izuku waved at All Might as he left, excitement all over his features. He stood there staring at where All Might was standing, then remembered he had somewhere to be. He continued on his way, now armed with a story to tell his mentor. Though he didn't tell All Might his name. Izuku arrived at the beach they were training at, Dagoba. It was a sad place, really, covered entirely with trash. Recently, though, it had been getting cleaner and was slowly gaining back its former beauty. Izuku walked through the piles until he got to a little clearing which was nigh impossible to spot from outside the beach. It was there that Izuku trained with his mentor. Izuku normally got there before him, though, so as usual he got changed into workout clothes while he waited. After about 20 minutes his mentor arrived. "Young Midoriya, I see you're here on time as usual. How about we get started, yeah?" "Yes, Mr. Yagi." Izuku met Mr. Yagi on a morning run a little over a month before school started. He was about halfway done with his route when he saw a blond man hunched over, gasping for breath. He ran up to the man and decided to strike up a conversation. "You okay there? I was doing my run, then I saw you looking like you just ran a marathon." The blond man seemed almost shocked that someone was talking to him. He then smiled and spoke. "Yes, I'm fine, just taking a short break. I'm not exactly in the best shape." He gestured to himself as he said the last part. "And you? Did you just start? You seem to be doing fairly well for someone your age." The man continued. No, actually, I was about halfway when I saw you. Though I guess I am pretty good when it comes to running, especially when my quirk relies on it. That's probably why I'm a bit lacking in the upper body department compared to my legs." Izuku replied. "If I may ask, what is your quirk, young man?" The man asked. It's super speed. Though I get a few other perks like super endurance and increased regeneration, to name a couple. It's a mutation quirk too, so my legs are naturally well built, though my upper body is made to withstand the speeds I can, so I'm not exactly weak," Izuku spoke shyly. "Damn, that's amazing. His quirk is perfect for hero work. That's amazing. I do hope you're aiming to become a hero?" the man asked him. Izuku smiled widely and spoke, excitement clear in his voice. "Yes, sir, I want to help people with a smile on my face, just like All Might." The man smiled at that. "Just like me, huh? I hope he succeeds. Well, young man, it was nice meeting you. Oh, and it may be a little late now, but my name is Yagi Tashinori." He offered his hand to Izuku. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Yagi. My name is Midoriya Izuku. Izuku said in reply, a smile on his face. Izuku turned away so that he could finish his run. Just before he could get going again, though, Mr. Yagi called out from behind him, young Midoriya, actually, I think I could help you out with some strength training. It's up to you, though. Izuku took a few moments to think about it. I mean, I was already checking out some gyms, but if he's willing to help. Sure, what did you have in mind? Izuku said in return to the offer. Well, I was thinking you could meet me at Dagoba Municipal Beach this Saturday. We can get started then, if that's all right with you, young Midoriya? Mr. Yagi answered. Mr. Yagi thought to himself, this kid seems like a good candidate for one for all. Hopefully, my judgment isn't wrong. All right, say, is 12 p.m. all right? I'm pretty busy up until then, but I can switch my schedule around after that. Izuku agreed, while also taking the initiative and deciding on the time. That's a little later than I'd have liked, but if that's the earliest you can be there, then that will have to do. See you there, young Midoriya, as he replied. Mr. Yagi turned around and continued his run. Suffice to say, Izuku was satisfied with his morning run. He managed to find someone who not only praised his quirk, but also offered to train him. He was ecstatic when he got home, much to his mother's delight. They met up at the beach and decided that they would regularly meet up to train, though Mr. Yagi didn't do any training himself. He just supervised Izuku and gave him tips. While driving a truck to dump the trash Izuku moved, Mr. Yagi did eventually give Izuku a meal plan that would help build muscle. It was also around this time Izuku experienced a growth spurt, in which he grew several centimeters by the time school had started. Mr. Yagi also said that Izuku could get some training equipment for home if he felt like it, just in case he wanted to do some extra stuff. It was about a week after the sludge villain incident that Mr. Yagi had to cut one of their training sessions short, though. Why is that, sir? Izuku asked out of curiosity. I have a meeting I can't miss. It's very important. Mr. Yagi answered plainly. Izuku hummed to himself and thought, interesting. Well, if it's important, there's no helping it. And I don't think it's my place to find out either. It's his business, not mine. Well, have fun and good luck, Izuku said. As Mr. Yagi was leaving, he thought to himself, I don't think I'm ready to pass down one for all yet, but it has to be done soon or the torch will go out. So, I hope this Togata-kun that Night Eye speaks so highly of is as good as he says. From what I've heard and the little bit I've seen of him, he is quite remarkable, but I want more than just ability. I want will, I want conviction. That night, Izuku pushed himself a little harder with his home training because his beach training had ended early. That night, Mr. Yagi, better known as All Might, was presented with a difficult choice to make. Chapter 2, and they're off to a quick start. School continued as it had been in previous years, which was to simply go through the day, doing the work given to him, and deal with Katsuki whenever he did something stupid. Nothing changed, except that Katsuki seemed to get more desperate to put him in his place by the day. Nothing Izuku couldn't handle, though. The beach cleanup was doing its job, and the beach had started to really look beautiful. Izuku kept working on the beach, which by the 6th month was completely cleared. During the 6 months, Izuku had grown considerably taller, so he stood at a proud 181 centimeters, 5 foot 11.26 in height. The whole cleanup had actually really helped with his upper body development, since it showed him his upper limit was around 300 kilograms, 660 lbs, and he had managed to push it up to around 375 kilograms, 825 lbs. Izuku didn't really have any business at the beach anymore, so he only went there to do some running in the afternoon, since he read somewhere running on sand was supposed to help you work through a fuller range of motion or something. A month passed, and Izuku hadn't seen Mr. Yagi since the last day of beach cleanup. He was about to finish up his 10th and final length of the beach one day when he saw a familiar mop of blonde hair about 100 meters away. He immediately forwent any inhibitions about super speeding on sand and was a couple of meters in front of the man in less than a second, whose eyes widened for a second at the sudden appearance of the boy, but returned to normal once he recognized who it was. Mr. Yagi, long time, no see, how have you been? Izuku spoke excitedly, having missed the man who had somewhat acted like a father figure in place of his actual father. Ah, young Midoriya, I was looking for you. I've been well, thank you. Mr. Yagi answered, smiling as he finished. His eyes twitched to Izuku's right, probably because someone was walking in their direction. Looking for me? What for? Izuku asked, quirking one of his eyebrows. The man started looking nervous for a few seconds before releasing a breath and beginning to speak. Well, you see, I just felt that you should know I. He was interrupted by a clicking sound. Izuku felt something cold and solid touch the back of his head as a man spoke gruffly from behind him, "Don't move, or the kid dies." Mr. Yagi locked up immediately. Beads of sweat started forming on his head. Izuku was stiff. He didn't know if he could dodge bullets. He had never been able to accurately measure how fast he could go, and he didn't know what sort of gun the villain had, nor did he know the man's quirk. He had to hope he could talk his way out of it. "Wow, what is it, you? Shut the fuck up, kid, I'll blow your fucking head off." Izuku shut his mouth. "I guess this is it, huh? I can't even talk him out of it. It sucks, but I was never able to become a he." "Oh, I know who you are. It was hard to see cause of the sun behind you. But you're the secretary guy for All Might, ain't ya?" Mr. Yagi's and Izuku's eyes both widened. Mr. Yagi's out of shock of someone recognizing him, and Izuku's from learning that Mr. Yagi worked for All Might. "I wonder, what would happen if I killed you?" the villain asked, clearly not expecting an answer as he aimed the gun from Izuku's head to Mr. Yagi. "Goodbye, Blondie." He pulled the trigger. The world slowed down. The bullet looked like it was moving at walking pace. Izuku was moving before he could even think, but he didn't get anywhere near the speed the bullet was moving. My brain must be going into overdrive, Izuku thought, realizing that he probably wouldn't be able to stop the bullet. He tracked the trajectory of the bullet through the air, right to the left side, Mr. Yagi's chest, where his heart lay. Izuku knew he had to stop the bullet. He needed to go faster. He pushed his arms and legs with all his might, but made no progress. He wanted to scream, but knew it wouldn't change anything, least of all help. The bullet crept closer and closer, centimeter by centimeter, towards Mr. Yagi, further and further away from him. He needed to go faster. 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 Something inside Izuku clicked, and he was imbued with power. Green lightning erupted in the air around Izuku as he sped past the bullet, past Mr. Yagi, and stopped at the road. He immediately turned around and saw the bullet, no longer making its way to Mr. Yagi, instead staying suspended in the air as if something was holding it there. Izuku made his way back and nearly overshot it, and used to that level of speed. He stood in front of Mr. Yagi, the bullet an arm's length away. He pushed the bullet to the side, somehow not disrupting its momentum and other physics, redirecting it to fly past him and Mr. Yagi. Time resumed at its normal pace. The green electricity was gone from his body, and he was exhausted and in excruciating amounts of pain. The villain was wide-eyed and frozen in shock for a few seconds before smirking and talking. "So you're fast, huh? Pretty neat considering my quirk allows me to accelerate any and all projectiles that leave my person. How long do you think you can keep it up, brat?" He began pulling the trigger again and again. Izuku tried to go as fast as he did before, but he couldn't, so he did the next best thing after redirecting bullets, pushing the target out of the way. He threw Mr. Yagi away as quickly as he could as the bullets approached. He didn't notice that Mr. Yagi was a little more muscular than he was a minute ago. There weren't any more flashes from the gun, and Izuku could see 9 bullets in the air, so he guessed the villain used his full magazine. Izuku was still in pain from his stunt before, and he knew for sure his speed, when he wasn't in pain, wasn't enough to dodge 9 bullets coming at him, almost twice as fast as the one from before. He realized that his life may just end there. He closed his eyes. He wouldn't get to be a save everyone with a smile like All Might, but at least he saved someone before he died. "No, I will not let it end like this. I have to become a hero, no matter what it takes." Izuku's eyes flew open and he moved. His body screamed at him. He grit his teeth, turning towards the direction he threw Mr. Yagi, only to see that Mr. Yagi no longer there. In his place stood All Might, who was staring at the young man. Izuku would normally have screamed and tried and fanboy over his idol, but it wasn't the right time for that. He moved his legs, only for them to falter. He began to fall. All Might was moving towards him in slow motion, trying to catch him before he hit the ground. Izuku felt the air part as a bullet flew past him. He felt it several more times as the rest followed suit. Izuku was close to hitting the ground when All Might's giant hands appeared underneath him, and held him in place gingerly for what felt like years. Suddenly, he heard yelling, but it wasn't slow or deep like it normally was. It was fast and far too loud. In his groggy and pain-filled state, Izuku couldn't understand why. Izuku was out like a light before long. When Izuku came to, he was staring at an unfamiliar white ceiling. His body was stiff with pain. There was a sharp smell and steady beeping somewhere off to the side. He tried to sit up, but he couldn't move with the pain. He instead tried to speak, but his throat was dry and only strangled noises came out. There must have been someone else in the room because he heard quick footsteps soon after. Izuku? It was his mother. Are you awake, honey? He tried to nod, but pain sparked through his neck when he did. Instead, he opted to grunt. Oh, thank goodness. I'll call a nurse so we can get you checked up. He grunted in affirmation. It was only after his mother said that when his eyes widened more than anyone thought possible for a human. He remembered what happened before he passed out. He immediately tried to force himself to sit up through the pain, grunting loudly in pain the whole time. His mother immediately forced him back down and ordered him, "No, you have to rest." His only response was to try speaking Imur. Agi. A confused look came over his mother's face before she realized what he said, smiling at her son worrying about others over himself. Oh, Mr. Yagi is fine. He was only a little roughed up after you pushed him, but luckily All Might arrived and stopped the villain. That was all yesterday. She quickly added the little bit on the end, as if it were truly important. After thinking that, Izuku realized it was important. Yesterday was Sunday. That meant he had school today. He was missing school. His mother must have seen the panicked look on his face as it dawned upon him that he was missing school. Don't worry. I've called the school and said you won't be coming in today or tomorrow. He calmed down at that. The only thing he could think of that really didn't sit well with him were the rumors that were going to spread about him. People were probably going to say he got attacked by a villain and was too weak to do anything, and that's why he was in the hospital. Everyone was just going to treat him worse. Except for the teachers. They just ignored everything to do with him. Unless it involved getting him in trouble, then they were on him like flies to a corpse. A nurse came in not too long after his outburst. She did some checkups, asked him some questions after giving him some water to hydrate his throat. Before she left, she said she would notify the doctor who should be there in a few minutes. His mother slowly gave him some water to help his still dry throat. Some time passed, and they sat and lay in comfortable silence. Izuku was about to ask his mother why he felt so tired and in pain when the door to his room opened. The doctor that came in was not the one Izuku was expecting. He immediately started gushing, "Oh my god, it's recovery girl, you're so AMA. Wait, Mr. Yagi?" Only for him to interrupt himself when he saw who followed her inside. "Oh, it's good to see you're well, young Midoriya. I called in a favor. It's the least I could do for the person who saved my life." Mr. Yagi smiled as he spoke, but it almost looked strained, as if there was more to it than what he said. "Now, young man, you're probably wondering why you're in the hospital and not feeling well. I'll get straight to the point. You overused your quirk." The confusion was the only thing Izuku could feel after he heard Recovery Girl say that. His quirk didn't work like that, though. He could only overuse his quirk if he ran at super speeds for hours on end, which even then only counted as regular exhaustion from exercise. "I can understand your confusion. Toshinori here told me there was a flash of green electricity before you appeared in front of him. From the research I've done on you and your quirk, that's not how your quirk works, considering it's a mutant-type quirk and not an emitter." Recovery Girl explained. She continued after Izuku nodded in understanding. It has been theorized, however, that quirks can evolve temporarily under high-stress situations. It is also known that some mutant-type quirks can have qualities of transformation and emitter-type quirks. Izuku's eyes widened. The bullet. When it was getting closer to Mr. Yagi, I tried to go faster than I ever had before. I kept trying, but nothing happened. It was when the bullet was about this far away. Izuku gestured his left hand to his right arm, from his fingertips to just below his shoulder, when something inside me clicked. It felt as if I had this large reserve of power, and I was at the road before I realized what had happened. Mr. Yagi's eyes widened when he heard that. I ran back to Mr. Yagi to protect him, but the bullet wasn't moving anymore. It was frozen in the air. I moved the bullet to the side and released my hold on the power. Then I felt pain all over. The villain shot the rest of his bullets, and that's about all I remember. Izuku finished quietly, feeling a little ashamed of himself that was all he could remember. Izuku looked to his mother who was sitting quietly, tears spilling out of her eyes. Izuku. He could hear the pride in her voice. Before he could say anything, she jumped on him and held him tightly in a hug. Even though it hurt, Izuku hugged her back. While I understand what you must be going through, Ms. Midoriya, I'm sure your son must be in a lot of pain right now. He still needs to recover after all. His mother slowly let go of him and went back to her seat. At least we know what happened now. Thank you for your account, young man. Now, we'll keep you here for another night for observation, then if I think you're well enough, you'll be discharged sometime tomorrow. Izuku nodded. I'm sure you're hungry. I'll get a nurse to bring you some food. In the meantime, why don't you and Tashinori here have that conversation you were going to have before you were interrupted? Ms. Midoriya, I'm sure they'd like some privacy. Plus, there are some things I need to tell you, so if you could come with me, please. Recovery girl gestured to the door as she spoke to his mother, who got up and walked out ahead of her. Don't mess up, Tashinori. Her tone was heavy as she spoke before she left and closed the door behind her. Yagi Tashinori had never been more nervous in his life than he had been at that moment. He had already resolved himself to tell young Midoriya, but he still felt nervous about it. What if he says no? That question kept going through his mind. Mr. Yagi, you had something to tell me? Young Midoriya pulled him out of his thoughts. Oh, yes. Well, you might not believe me, but Midoriya quirked up an eyebrow. Well, I'll just show you. Tashinori paused and took a step away from Midoriya to make room, before he suddenly enlarged, gaining muscle. I'm All Might. Young Midoriya looked shocked, his eyes wide. Why tell me? The young man asked, disbelief evident in his tone. Tashinori deflated in a cloud of steam. 5 years ago, I was injured gravely. I lost my stomach and my respiratory system was nearly destroyed. Because of this, I can only be a hero for around 3 hours a day. Since I am running out of time as the symbol of peace, I was thinking about making you my successor. What you did yesterday only helped me to affirm my decision. Young Midoriya, I want you to inherit my quirk, he finished loudly, but making sure nothing escaped through the walls of the hospital room, even if they were pretty thick. 5 years ago, that was Toxic Chainsaw, but you were fine. It was even televised, but wait. I mean, people have theorized what your quirk was ever since you debuted. But a quirk that can be inherited outside of the family? That makes no sense. The boy kept rambling on. Young Midoriya, calm down, please. Hear me out. Tashinori pleaded. Midoriya shut his mouth, looking at him intently, clearly waiting for him to speak. My quirk is called One for All, and it is a crystallization of power that has been passed down from generation to generation, getting stronger with each holder. I am currently the 8th holder, and I am offering to you to be the 9th. That is, only if you agree. Midoriya stared at him, baffled. He must still be caught up on the idea of my quirk being able to be inherited outside of genetics. Try not to worry too much about the impossibility of how it gets inherited. Just think about it, and tell me if you take my offer. Here's my phone number and email so you can contact me. I'll take my leave. Tashinori turned away from the young man after handing him a slip of paper with his number on it and walked to the door. He reached for the handle, but before he could grab it, Midoriya called out, wait. Tashinori turned back to face the young man and saw exactly what he was looking for. There was an inferno of determination in his eyes and an equally determined look on his face. I'll do it. As I am now, I'm not fast enough to achieve my dream. I know the path will be arduous, especially since I'll have to learn how to use a new quirk, but I accept. Tashinori smiled. All right then, after your discharge and you've completely recovered, we can get started. I look forward to working with you, sir. His successor nodded his head in a small bow. With that, Tashinori took his leave. Izuku did get discharged from the hospital the next day, and he was in a lot less pain, thanks to the help of Recovery Girl and the increased regeneration his quirk offered. He didn't get home until a little bit after lunchtime, though, so he was uber hungry since hospital food was barely enough of a breakfast for him. He was told to rest at home for at least another day and not to use his quirk actively until the next week. Well, I need to find something to do while I recover. I did miss the hero news while I was recovering, so maybe I should do some analysis? That'd be nice. After he got into more comfortable clothing for the surprisingly warm day, that's what he did for a few hours, and he had managed to fill another notebook. He was quite chuffed with himself. He got his last spare notebook and started preparing it for use later, which would probably be the next day. He checked the time and saw that his mother would be getting back from work in about an hour. He lay down on his bed, planning to nap for a little while. He was ordered to rest to assist with his recovery, and he was sure that sleep did the best job of that. The moment his head hit his pillow, he was out. When he next opened his eyes, he was standing in a void. Blackness. There was nothing and no one but him. He looked around and saw nothing. Then, there was a spark. Then another. They kept coming and got bigger. But something was strange. They were green. They got frequent and plentiful until it went silent and dark again. Several seconds passed. Then in the distance, Izuku saw something. It was a lightning bolt, but it was much larger than the sparks from before, and it was coming straight for him. He tried to move, but couldn't. He struggled for several seconds, but to no avail. The bolt hit him square in the chest, but there was no pain. His vision went white. He gasped for air. It was bright. He heard birds chirping. He looked out his window and saw that it was early morning. He looked to his bedside clock. 5:23 a.m. it read. He would have gone for his usual morning run, but since he was told not to buy the doctor, and he should listen to his doctor, he didn't. Instead, he continued to lay in bed, thinking about his dream. Was it a dream? He held a hand to his chest, trying to feel something. He stayed like that for a while. He rolled over onto his side and stared at the wall. He heard a soft knock on his bedroom door as it was opened. He looked from the wall and saw his mother. "I'm going to work now. There are leftovers from last night and some breakfast for you in the fridge. I've already called the school to say you won't be there today. Just rest, okay?" Izuku looked to his clock and lo and behold, it was indeed time for his mom to leave for work. "Okay, thank you. Have a good day at work. I'll see you this evening." He waved lazily as he finished. His mother smiled as she closed his door. He closed his eyes in an attempt to go back to sleep. But after what felt like forever, he was still wide awake. He threw his cover off and got up so he could have breakfast. He made his way to the kitchen uncharacteristically slowly. Once he was there, he opened the fridge and took out the leftovers from last night along with the breakfast his mother made for him. For the average person, it would have been a lot, but with how much of the food he eats that his body metabolizes for energy, it's an okay amount for him. He ate slowly, taking his time since he didn't have anything to do while he relaxed at home. He finished his meal. It was pretty warm considering what season it was, so Izuku took his shirt off and relaxed in the living room, shirtless, watching television. There was still some buzz around the attack he was in, but not much since villain attacks were a daily occurrence. It was midday before long, and Izuku was starting to feel hungry, despite the lack of exercise. He got up to make himself something to eat. He checked the fridge. Not much here. Maybe I should go shopping? I was told not to leave the house, though. Guess I'll just starve until Mom gets home. With that, Izuku went back to his room. It was there that for the first time in a long time, he admired the hero merchandise that he had collected over the years. It was mostly All Might, but there were some other heroes, like Ingenium, who he idolized for also have a speed-centric quirk, Ryukyu, Maruko, and one singular Endeavor action figure. He wasn't the biggest fan of Endeavor since the hero was always rude to civilians and he looked so unapproachable. He made you want to walk an extra kilometer to get a different hero to help. Regardless of hero preference, he'd always been enamored with their quirks. He had finished his 13th notebook the previous night, leaving him with an empty 14th one to start on. The first hero he always did was All Might. Then even though he wasn't a hero himself. After that, it was whichever hero caught his interest, which was new heroes most of the time. He sat down at his desk and started on his newest notebook. He wrote down everything he knew about All Might after a sketch, minus what he learned the other day at the hospital. It took him about a half hour since he made sure to be thorough, plus he couldn't go any faster without his quirk. He moved on to his own quirk. He skipped the sketch since there were no reliable, good photos of himself he could use. So I already knew I could go faster than sound. I already knew my limits in terms of strength. I guess the only new thing is what happened that night at the beach. I tapped into some kind of hidden reservoir of power. It also had a weird byproduct, some kind of electricity, which was green for some reason. I can only learn more by using my quirk, but I'm not allowed to, so that'll have to wait. Well, that's all I have for now. I can add more and change things later. Izuku was back at school the next day and was berated by his teachers for not doing the homework he wasn't given. He assumed someone was asked to give it to him, but they decided he wasn't worth it. He was pretty miffed about it, but there wasn't anything he could do except the homework alongside his classwork. Luckily for him, the week was already almost over. No one said anything to him about his absence, and even Katsuki wasn't doing anything. Not that he wasn't grateful, it was just suspicious considering no one had any problems before. Not being able to use his quirk to assist with classwork was pretty hard on him, but he was already pretty smart, so as far as anyone else was concerned, nothing was different. There was someone that he noticed kept looking at him throughout the lessons. A girl with light gray hair tied into two tails that sat towards the front of the class. He had never talked to her before. He didn't even know her name, but he was pretty sure she didn't have any friends. Not in the same class anyway. He ignored her, not like it mattered what she was looking at him for. She might not have even been looking at him, could have been the kid to his right or left, or even the kid behind him. He got through the day and packed up his stuff in record time without his quirk. He was one of the first few students out of the door into the hallway, and despite the location of the classroom on the highest floor before the roof, one of the first out of the building. He was halfway home before he felt like he was being watched. He turned back slightly to look behind him, but saw no one. Thinking nothing amiss, he kept on. The feeling never went away, but he didn't see or hear anyone, so there was nothing he could do. Once he got to his apartment building, someone behind him called out, "Excuse me," it was a girl. "It's not likely she's calling out for me. I'll just keep going." "Excuse me, Midoriya, Izuku, huh?" He turned around. It was the girl from class. Now that she was up close, Izuku could see she had beautiful blue eyes. Thanks. Shit. I said that out loud, huh? Might need to sew my mouth shut someday. They stared at each other in silence. Izuku was just waiting for her to continue while she just looked at him, with a weird look on her face. "Well, you gonna tell me what you want or can I go?" "I just wanted to apologize." "For what?" "As far as I know, you haven't done anything." "Ah, well, that's the issue. I didn't do anything. As class president, I was asked to take the homework to you, but I chickened out. Then I followed you home and even used my quirk to hide from you. So that's why I felt like I was being watched. Being able to turn invisible is pretty good though." Apology accepted, I guess. There was never really an issue to begin with since I'm ahead. Plus, my quirk allows me to process information faster than most of everyone, so I can solve problems way faster than anyone else. "Huh, but I thought your quirk was super speed?" She looked more confused than a lost fart in a perfume factory. "Yeah, but you can't travel at the speed of sound if you can't process everything around you at least at the same speed. So if I just process the information faster, I get more time to think about things. Of course, on doctor's orders, I'm not to use my quirk until next week at least, but as I said, I'm already ahead in classwork." Her face lit up in understanding. "Oh, that's way better than my quirk. But being able to become invisible is pretty awesome in its own right, I think." "Yeah, it would be if that were my quirk. I only become invisible to one person at a time. I've already tried training to make it multiple people, but it never works." She must have been bullied because her quirk is weak, even though I think it's pretty powerful in its own right. "Well, thanks for the apology. It's getting late, so you should go home now unless you want to stay for dinner. You're already here, and I'm sure my mom won't mind." A strained look came over her features as she contemplated what she should do. "Also, from what I experienced, your quirk also makes the things you're wearing and holding invisible with you. If that's the case, then being invisible shouldn't be your goal. It should be to make only certain items on you invisible." She looked to him, her eyes wide. "I had never thought of that. You've only known me for about 10 minutes, and you already helped me. Thank you so much." She bowed almost 90 degrees. "It's no problem. How about you message your parents and let them know you're having dinner at my place? You can even give them my contact info." A strange look plagued her face, which prompted Izuku to ask, "What? Can you not have dinner at my place?" "No, it's just, I live alone. My parents aren't the most caring people. They found me a place to live, and they pay for my rent, food, and tuition. Other than that, they don't have anything to do with me." "I see. Then there are no problems if you stay the night too. I promise I'm not some creep, just trying to be courteous to the one person who approached for a reason other than to try bullying me." "All right, then I'll accept," she smiled. God, she was beautiful. She immediately started blushing. "I'm going to sew my mouth shut before the end of the year if this keeps up." She laughed. He smiled. He loved that laugh. I never got your name. Sorry, even though you're the class president. Izuku looked bashful. Oh, it's Tamori. Tamori now. She stood with her feet together and her hands behind her back while she leaned her head to her right and smiled with her eyes closed. She was really beautiful and she was blushing. Wait, why was she blushio? I'm going to sew my mouth shut very soon. Chapter 3. They clear the first obstacle with ease. Now had never been more grateful for her quirk than she had been then. All she wanted to do was hide from this boy who not only didn't think there was nothing wrong with what she didn't do, he thought her quirk was good, and that she was beautiful. She couldn't bear to let him see her. They arrived at Midoriya's front door, and he unlocked it. They walked in, and he led her into the living room. Take a seat, and make yourself comfortable. I'm going to get changed, then I'll be right back. He left. Now took a seat on the couch, feeling everything but comfortable. A few minutes passed in silence. She contemplated using her quirk and leaving, but felt bad doing that without saying anything. Please get home soon, Ms. Midoriya. Sorry, it took longer than I expected without my quirk. Midoriya walked in, wearing a tight-fitting t-shirt that said shirt on it, along with what looked like pajama pants, but was a size too small. Man, I need to get some new clothes soon. These are too small because of my growth spurt. Right. Now is having a hard time hiding her blush. I can see his abs, and he's jacked. His biceps are thicker than my thighs. You all right there? Where are my manners? Would you like a drink? Yes, please. Will tea do? Or would you like something else? Tea is fine, thank you. I don't know if I'll live to see tomorrow. He didn't know if it was showing, but Izuku was nervous. He was doing his best to be nonchalant, and he was hoping that it wasn't coming off as asshole-ish. I've never been home alone with a girl, let alone one as pretty as her. Here you go. He walked in from the kitchen and handed Tamori her tea. Thank you. She bowed her head slightly in thanks. I'm sorry, we're going to have to wait until my mom gets home to have dinner. I don't really know how to cook. He smiled nervously. We can talk until then, I guess. Tamori suggested cautiously. All right then, what do you like to do for fun? Izuku asked slowly, not sure if he was acting too familiar or not. Oh, getting personal now, are we? Where the fuck did that come from? Personality shift? What the fuck is wrong with me? No. I just wasn't sure how to start the conversation. He was blushing like mad and waving his arms around, all the while trying to justify his question. Cute. What? Am I the one talking out loud now? Dumbass. What? Play it cool. Act like nothing happened. Know why? Because nothing happened. Did you just say cute? She whipped her head around, looking away from him. To hide her blush, you must be hearing things. Yeah, probably. Why did he sound so sad? Oh well, to answer your question from before, I like to film things. Nothing in particular though, so don't ask. She hardened her voice as she finished, to emphasize that he shouldn't ask any more about her filming. What about you? What do you do for fun? I analyze heroes and stuff, Midoriya said simply. Oh, now this is interesting. Yeah, I draw a profile of them, then I write down all their known capabilities with and without their quirks. Then using that information, I try and figure out how their quirks work among other things. Can you do mine? Wait, what did I just ask? Actually, you know what, never me. Sure. What? What? Sure. As long as you don't mind telling me everything about your quirk, like how it manifested and its limitations. If only because there is no hero data of you to analyze, like the underground hero Eraserhead. Well, I guess I'll start with when my quirk manifested. I was about 4 years old, and I was playing hide and seek with some of the neighborhood kids. I was hiding, and the seeker had come and had actually found me. But when he looked at me, he said, I thought for sure someone was here, and I was so confused. I called out to him, and he looked back, and the rest is history. Interesting. So what is your quirk called? I call it imperfect invisibility, since you know. Right. Any known limitations? I can't use my quirk on myself. That makes sense. Anything else? None. He furrowed his eyebrows and thought. He's cute. He did that for a minute before he spoke again, other than what I suggested before. Do you know if your quirk works through or on cameras? It seems I missed something potentially crucial about my quirk, huh? She said, sounding slightly dejected. Yes, but don't think you're stupid or anything. Something like that is quite subtle compared to being completely invisible in a one-on-one fight. Oh, another thing. Can you only use your quirk on people you can see, or can it work on anyone you know is there? What do you mean by that? I mean, alright, I'll put like this. Let's say there's someone behind you, but you know they're there. Would your quirk work on them? Maybe. I don't know. Should we test that? Sure, here, stand up. She complied after he offered a helping hand, which realistically she didn't need. Now I'll stand behind you, and on my word, activate your quirk on me. Midoriya moved behind her. Are you ready? At her nod, he gave her the word okay now. The familiar sensation of feeling lighter came over her as she activated her quirk, but she didn't feel as light as she normally did when she used her quirk on someone. All she heard from the boy was strangled noises and a slapping noise. He hadn't said anything since she activated her quirk. Can I turn around now? She asked, her voice unsteady since she didn't know what happened. Yes, please. The weight returned as she turned around and deactivated her quirk. So, did it work? She asked, a strange combination of curiosity and nervousness in her voice. Kind of. Not really. He had his face covered by his hands and Tamori could see red where it wasn't, and his lack of detail aggravated the girl slightly. Well, spit it out, she commanded, way more aggressively than she intended. He pulled his hands away slightly before he spoke. Well, I could see you, but not your clothes. His face got redder as he went on, and he finished barely above a whisper. Because of that, it took now a few seconds to register what he had said. He could see me, but not my. Holy foo. It was conveniently at that moment the front door opened with a slight creak from the hinges, and someone called out, I'm home, Izuku. So she's not some random girl or your girlfriend? Izuku's mother asked, a hint of worry, and is that hope in her tone. No, we're in the same class, but that's it, Izuku shot back. He missed how Tamori's face fell slightly. If you say so. Give me a few minutes to prepare, then I can get started on dinner. Are you going to stay the night, Tamori? The short, plump woman looked to Tamori expectantly, but with motherly concern alongside. If it's all right with you, Ms. Midoriya, Tamori answered quietly, a tinge of red in her cheeks. Of course it is, and please, call me Inko, dear. Is there anything in particular you like to eat? Roasted corn and meat, Tamori answered without hesitation, which caught Inko and Izuku off guard. Inko recovered quickly enough and gave Tamori a smile the girl had never thought she'd ever see aimed at her, a smile full of love. Izuku, dear, could you please get the extra futon and show Tamori to your room, please? The way she said it, Izuku knew it was less of a request and more of an instruction. He sighed. All right, follow me. I'll take you to my room. Izuku called back to his mother before he gestured to Tamori to follow him. He led her through a short hallway and stopped in front of a door with an All Might theme nameplate on it with his name on it. He turned to her and said, fair warning, I'm a pretty big hero fan. He opened the door and stood to the side to let Tamori in. She walked forward slowly before she turned into the room. She gasped. Whoa, it's like an otaku's room. She clearly hadn't meant to say that as soon after she slapped her hands over her mouth. She quickly looked at Izuku to see his reaction. His face was flushed. It wasn't exactly a compliment, but he was embarrassed nonetheless. Well, yeah, you're right. He stayed like that for a minute before he perked up suddenly and started speaking again. So would you like to take my bed or the extra futon? A pensive look came over her face as she tried to decide. He waited patiently for her, though he had to admit he was definitely using the time to admire her. Several minutes passed, and Izuku was about to speak before she answered with a confident look on her face, if it's no trouble, I'd like to take the bed. Sure, I was probably going to make you take it anyways, but you've saved me some time. I'll be back with the futon. In the meantime, you can explore my room, get comfortable, or you can go back to the living room. Without bothering to hear her reply, Izuku left his room and walked down the hall to the storage closet. He opened the closet and searched for the futon. After a few minutes of fumbling around, he managed to find it and get it out, leaving behind a small mess. He carried it back to his room quickly. He walked in to see Tamori looking through one of his earlier notebooks. He panicked. He forgot that he shouldn't be going any faster than walking pace and immediately zoomed in front of her, which shocked her into dropping the book. Izuku grabbed it midair and put it back, all while his face was almost a new shade of red. He didn't want Tamori to see his face, so he hung his head, keeping his eyes shut tightly. "I'm sorry," was all she said. "No, I should apologize. I said you could look around, but I always get embarrassed when someone looks at my notebooks. I always get made fun of for them," Izuku said quickly. "Oh, well, I think they're pretty amazing. A bit on the over-explaining side and repetitiveness, but they're comprehensive, to say the least. Plus, your drawings are really good." He looked up, eyes wide. A small smile came over his features. "Thanks. The only other person who ever said something like that was my mom." "Why are they all written in pencil?" She seemed to have blurted out. "Because I tend to use my quirk when I write, and I don't think the ink can get out at the speed of sound," Izuku said slowly, unsure since he had never actually tested it. They stood in silence for a few minutes. Eventually, they started to smell something delicious waft in from the kitchen. There was a low rumbling noise and Tamori's face flared red immediately. "Do you want to go have some food?" Izuku gestured behind him to his door as he spoke. He only received a nod for an answer. They walked in silence. "Oh, you're done? Dinner will be ready soon. You can just take a seat at the table." "Izuku, please set the table," Inko said after she heard their footsteps. Was all Izuku said as he walked towards the kitchen to get the cutlery and other things to set the table with. Tamori took a seat, her face still slightly red. After Izuku had set the table, he took his usual seat at the table, which happened to be close to Tamori. He didn't think anything of it. A few minutes passed before they heard the oven door open and close. Izuku's mother came around to the table holding an oven pan packed with roasted corn and a variety of meat. "Okay, let's eat," Inko announced after she returned her apron to the kitchen and took a seat at the table. "Thank you for the meal," both Izuku and Tamori said at the same time as they picked up their plates and went to dish up some food for themselves. They ate in silence. The only sound was the clinking of cutlery on plates every so often. Izuku's mom stopped eating at some point despite her plate still being quite full of food. She folded her hands in front of her and looked at Tamori. "So Tamori, is there anything you'd like to do in particular for a career?" Inko asked, her tone soft like usual. She waited patiently for a reply. Tamori swallowed her mouthful of food before taking her time to formulate a response. "I was looking at going into the film industry, but there are no schools nearby that my parents would be willing to pay for." Izuku's mother's eye twitched almost imperceptibly at that. "Oh, that's nice. Why don't you go to UA? I'm sure they have an elective for that sort of thing, and from what I've seen, they aren't too much more expensive than your middle school." Tamori's eyes widened, and she looked up to his mother so fast he thought she would get whiplash. They watched each other for what seemed like an eternity, Izuku's mother smiling lightly. Eventually, Tamori looked down to her plate and had a light dusting of red on her cheeks. "I don't think I could make it in, though," she said quietly. "Why not?" Izuku asked. Her breath caught in her throat. Izuku continued, "I think you'd get in. I've seen you place well in all the tests we've done so far." "I thought you didn't know me." "I knew your name, but I didn't have a face for that name. Until today, of course." She didn't say anything. They all continued to eat in silence. Eventually, they all finished eating, and Izuku collected everything and took it to the kitchen to be cleaned and packed away later. "Izuku, could you please show Tamori to the bathroom and prepare some clothes for her to sleep in?" "Okay, let's go, Tamori." After Izuku had shown her to the bathroom and where the extra towels were, he turned to leave so he could get some of his old clothes for her to wear. Before he could shut the door behind him, though, Tamori spoke, "Please call me now. I think that after today it's only right." She couldn't see it, but Izuku had a small smile on his face. "All right then, but it's only fair if you call me Izuku in turn. I'll be back soon with some clothes for you now." He closed the door and left quickly. He heard the shower get going as he walked towards his room. Today has been quite strange. I don't mind though, he thought to himself. He grabbed some clothes that he had outgrown at the start of the year. He made his way back to the bathroom and knocked on the door. At Nao's signal, he opened the door slightly and threw his clothes on the countertop next to the sink. He closed the door and went back to the living room where his mother was. They relaxed for a while until Izuku heard the bathroom door open, signaling that Nao had finished. He got up and went to shower, smiling at Nao on his way past. Izuku showered. After he was done, he got changed into his pajamas and made his way to his room. He walked in and saw Nao sitting on his bed looking at her phone screen. "Whatcha doing?" he asked. "Huh. Oh, I'm just going through social media and stuff." "Cool." Izuku set the extra futon up properly, and he sat down on it. He grabbed his most recent notebook and started a new entry in it. "Whatcha doing?" He stopped writing and looked at Now before he spoke, doing an entry on your quirk. "I'm almost done, actually, since there isn't very much to put in. I'm going to sleep once I'm done." She nodded silently. Izuku went back to writing. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see her pull back the duvet and get underneath. Once he was done, he closed the book and threw it on his desk along with his pen. He got up and turned off the light before he returned to the futon on the floor. He got under the blankets he grabbed with the futon. He shuffled around a bit to get comfortable, then closed his eyes and attempted to sleep. "Thank you," Now unexpectedly said. "What for?" "For thinking I can make it into UA. I was just stating the facts. Nothing more, nothing less. Even if you couldn't make it in, I'd offer help," Izuku said. Now didn't say anything else, so feeling satisfied, Izuku fell asleep with a smile on his face. Now woke up slowly, her eyes still closed. She remained like that for what felt like a few minutes before she realized something. "Wait. My bed isn't this comforta." She opened her eyes and came face to face with an unfamiliarly colored wall. She gasped loudly. She scrambled back to get away from it, as if it were going to attack her. She wasn't paying enough attention to her surroundings, though, because she then fell off the bed onto the floor. Or at least she would have, had there not already been something on the floor. Izuku stirred awake after hearing something in his room. "That's weird. Why do my shelves look so far off?" Then the events of the previous day came crashing onto him, along with Now. Oomph was all that came out of him on impact. He was in pain and shock from having a whole-ass person land on him, even if it was only after a measly foot of airtime. Said person immediately disappeared into thin air after realizing what they had done. That did not, however, change the fact that she was still on top of Izuku's chest, struggling to get off. Footsteps running down the hall followed a door slamming into a wall as it was flung open several seconds after the struggle started. "Are you guys okay?" Izuku's mother yelled, and swung his door open and flicked on the light. It was after her vision focused, though, that she saw Now sitting on his chest, Izuku doing nothing. She seemed to visibly calm down, but then was energized with something else as she closed the door, apologizing for the interruption. He heard her wail, "My baby boy is growing up so fast," as she made her way back to her room. Now had managed to calm down shortly after that, and even remembered what happened that caused her to wake up in an unfamiliar room. "So, can you get off me, please?" She practically leapt off his chest and back onto his bed, where she was before the whole ordeal began. Of all the things I expected to happen this morning, getting jumped by a pretty girl was not one of them, Izuku said quietly. After realizing what he said, he began praying to whatever god was listening, that Now hadn't heard him. He looked up to her and saw her with her face buried in her legs, arms wrapped around them. "Sorry," was all she said. "No, it's fine. Should we go have some breakfast? I, for one, am starving." After a little nod from her, Izuku gets up. He faced her and offered a hand well. She looked up and stared at his hand. Eventually, she took it and climbed off his bed. Neither of them let go. Izuku led her to the dining table, where he got her to take a seat so she could wait for him to use his less-than-stellar cooking skills to prepare a breakfast meal for the two of them. He attempted making scrambled eggs on toast, but that didn't turn out so well. On his first try, the toast was a little darker than brown, and the eggs had started shrinking in the pan at some point. Luckily, Izuku had enough tact to know that he shouldn't feed that to the only person that may potentially become his friend. So, on his second try, he kept close track of everything, somehow managing without his quirk, and made a nearly exact copy of his mother's. Of course, he did prepare a meal for his mother since she was likely to come in anytime soon. "Good morning, you two." "Morning, Mom." "Morning, Ms. Midoriya." Now and Izuku spoke on top of each other, but being the superhuman mother she is, Inko caught both of what they said. "I said to call me Inko, dear." Now nodded slightly. "Also, sorry for interrupting you two earlier. I had no idea you were so close." She was smirking. "MOMIT wasn't like that." Izuku yelled in indignation as Nao's face went supernova at Inko's words. He sighed. "Here's breakfast, Mom." He gestured to a plate a little off to the side. He grabbed the remaining 2 plates and walked to the dining table and handed the good one to Nao. She said a quiet, "Thank you," as Izuku placed it in front of her. The three of them ate in silence until Inko decided to get down to business. "I've washed your clothes for you, Tamori, and I've also prepared a lunch for you to take to school." When she saw Nao open her mouth to say something, his mother quickly said, "It's no problem, dear, and there's no need to thank me. Any semi-decent person would have done the same." They returned to eating in silence. Nao was the first to finish and just sat there. "You can get your clothes and get changed, you know. I'll deal with the dishes," Izuku said, not taking his eyes off his plate as he continued to eat. She didn't say anything, only got up from her seat and walked away, which left Izuku and his mom alone to talk. He was wholly regretting what he said. "So," the woman began. "It's nothing like that. She apologized for getting me in trouble, and she was already here, so I offered dinner and a place to stay. We never talked before yesterday." Izuku quickly shut her down. "Is that so? I hope you can at least be friends then. She is cute though. I wouldn't mind her being my daughter in." MOM. Meanwhile, Nao had heard everything they had said and was having a very hard time focusing on getting changed, especially since she realized she was wearing Izuku's clothes. The two of them stepped out the front door successively, Izuku first then Nao. They wordlessly started their way to school, now trailing a couple of steps behind Izuku. The atmosphere surrounding them was almost palpable, not helped by the fact neither of them attempted to say anything to the other. Izuku had decided he had had enough, so, "Are we friends now, or like what?" That had seemed to actually have caught Nao off guard, shown by the fact she stopped walking. I guess. I mean, if you want to be. I don't see why not. You're a cool person, you know. Plus, only having your mom and your trainer to talk to is pretty lonely." Izuku had stopped to wait for her as he talked. He looked her way all the while. She had a shocked look on her face for a minute before she got her bearings and spoke back, "I can get pretty rude when I get familiar with people. I guess what I'm saying is let me know, then I'll stop talking." Nice. That opens up a lot of opportunities for banter. Plus, I can be an idiot sometimes, so you can play the straight man. Or would it be straight woman? Well, doesn't matter. He looked at her with a small smile on his face. She only stood still, clearly since she was still attempting to process his words. After a while, she giggled. His smile grew wider. "Come on. We don't want to be late for school now." With that, they set off for school. The day was practically the same as every other. Only that time, Izuku's mind was thoroughly occupied with thoughts on what to do with the fact that he now had a friend. Under more preferable circumstances, he would know, but he hadn't gotten preferable circumstances, and thus had no idea what you're supposed to do with a friend. Lunchtime rolled around, and Izuku had a bright thought: friends eat lunch together. Thusly, he got out of his seat after grabbing his lunch from his bag and made his way to the front of the classroom, where his new friend sat organizing her notes from the previous lesson. The girl clearly hadn't noticed his approach, or expected, because she jumped slightly when he spoke to her, "Want to eat lunch together?" he asked, holding his lunch up as if to gesture that he wanted to do it then and there. Just let me finish my notes," she said quickly, not looking up from her book as she did. Izuku paid no mind to the slight redness he could see in her ears, thinking it was a trick of the light from the window. "Huh. What the fuck are you doing there, Deku?" "Oh great. Just what I needed." "The fuck you talking to, Invisibit?" Izuku moved before Katsuki finished. Everyone left in the class stopped what they were doing when they heard a loud thud reverberate throughout the room. Izuku's tone was colder and more filled with anger than it had ever been, talking to the blonde that was now in his vice like grip. "Finish that sentence, and I'll make sure you can't get into UA." The ash-blonde boy was frozen in shock, but only for a brief moment before anger flared up inside him at the brunette's words. "You're just a Deku, you can't do jack shit, and it's not like she's any bet." A fist to his gut shut him up. Izuku let go of the other boy, which allowed him to hunch over in pain. He quickly turned to Nao, who had stopped working on her notes and was staring at Izuku incredulously. She opened and closed her mouth several times to try and formulate something to say about Izuku's actions. He walked over to her and spoke. "You gonna finish your notes? I'd like to get away from the crowd. Unless you don't want to have lunch anymore." His voice tapered off into sadness. He'd only known her a day. Why would it hurt if she didn't want to hang out with him anymore? "Oh no, it's fine, I'll just put my stuff away." She hurriedly put her stuff back in her desk, then grabbed the lunch oh so generously prepared for her by his mother. They walked out of the still silent classroom. For several seconds after their departure, it remained that way, until someone muttered out a quiet "what the fuck?" They walked through the halls side by side in silence. Neither one wanted to say anything about the events that transpired before their departure from the classroom. "You didn't need to do that," Now said. Her voice had an edge to it that made Izuku feel a small twinge of guilt. "You'd be right, but you're my friend, so I had to. What kind of friend would I be if I didn't help you out?" Izuku quipped, hoping that would help her change her mind. She didn't say anything. The two of them continued walking, no real destination in mind. Eventually, they found themselves in a secluded spot behind the main building. It just so happened to have a set of stairs they could sit on. So they took their seats and dug into their respective lunches. Now was the first to finish, which prompted Izuku to think, "Man, she has one hell of an appetite. And I thought I ate a lot." "So how fast can you run? You said you can go at the speed of sound, but what's your limit?" Now asked, definitely not the shy girl she had been previously. Exactly like she said. "I have no idea. Maybe Mach 2? If not, then somewhere between Mach 1 and 2. Izuku said, leaning his head side to side a little to help express just how unsure he was. He finished his meal, which by the time he did, lunch was almost over, which meant they had either spent longer walking around than he'd thought, or he'd taken longer to eat than he expected. He hoped it was the former. They made their way back to class. They managed to get back in their seats right before the bell rang to signal the end of lunch and that students should make their way back to class. The rest of the day went off without a hitch. Not even a peep from Katsuki. School ended and Now and Izuku walked most of the way home together. Now decided she should go home, so she did, while Izuku decided to get her address later. They almost forgot to exchange numbers, but after a realization after turning the street corner, Now ran back to Izuku. They laughed. Overall, Izuku's return to school was fruitful, even if said fruit started out bitter. Chapter 4. With a boost around the bend, they're down a straight. It was Tuesday, and Izuku only had one more day before he could get back into the swing of things. But it was also then he realized he hadn't done anything Quirk-related other than study his new friend's Quirk. So, the night before he was supposed to meet Mr. Yagi, he decided to meditate. After dinner and getting ready to sleep, he sat on his bed cross-legged, elbows tucked to his side as he held his forearms out to hang over his knees with his hands in the OK shape. It was stereotypical, but he had no idea what meditating was supposed to look like. He sat still with his eyes closed for an indeterminate amount of time. It wasn't working, so he laid down on his back, on top of his covers. His eyes were still closed, and he was having a hard time staying awake. Unconsciousness seemed to be clawing at his mind, and it was very tempting to grab back and run with it. But he had a task to do. He had still made no progress after a while, and thought it was a waste of time. But when he went to open his eyes, nothing happened. He immediately thought sleep must have crept up on him. But in the distance of the inky black expanse, a small spark of green caught his attention. He moved towards it, and it seemed to get bigger, until it seemed to be the size of his bedroom. He stopped moving and reached an arm out towards it. His fingers touched it, and a tingly feeling immediately ran up his arm and throughout his body. He pulled his arm back out of surprise. It seems to contain an energy of sorts. Is this what gave me that power a week ago? Following that line of thought, Izuku realized that if it was a container of energy, how the fuck was anyone supposed to get anything out of it? It was after that thought he realized he was technically in a dreamscape, so he remodeled the simple box into a container with a faucet attached to the bottom. It looked like a supersized juice container one would see the teachers put out on school trips. Izuku walked up to the faucet and tried opening it. He used every last bit of strength he had, but it wouldn't budge. Falling back on the dreamscape he was in, he attempted to open it again, but to no avail. Maybe it only opened a little when that villain almost killed Mr. Yagi. That was still a huge power-up though. Maybe I could train this more in my own time since I'll be pretty busy with practicing with One for All, he theorized. He opened his eyes and saw thin rays of sunlight stabbing through the gaps in his curtains. He closed them, not wanting to deal with the bright light. Not being late for school, though, is a powerful motivator, though, because the moment he did, his mother called, "Izuku, you need to get up soon, or you're going to be late for school." He was out of bed, and getting into his uniform faster than you could say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. He managed to make it to school on time. Izuku messaged Mr. Yagi, well, All Might now, that they could meet up at the beach that afternoon since he no longer had to rest, even if he had used his quirk on accident a couple of times. So he eagerly went through the day, which earned him more than a handful of snide comments from his friend. He didn't mind, though. He knew he could be a bit on the excitable side. Only thing was, his friend thought he was excited to use his quirk again, which wasn't completely wrong, but it wasn't entirely right. The struggle came that afternoon, when he had to tell Now he couldn't go home with her. Why not? You getting shy all of a sudden? She said smugly, putting a hand in front of her face to stifle fake laughter that was never there. Nah, I'm just meeting my trainer at the beach I cleaned up. I didn't think you'd find it interesting. You can still come over for dinner, though. I can even pick you up now. Literally. He played it off, hoping he sounded as calm as he thought he did. She sounded suspicious. Even though they'd been friends barely a week, she could already get a good read on him. Didn't help that Izuku may as well have had his heart on his sleeve. All right, it'd be cool to experience super speed. Probably, she said after a few minutes of deliberation. They walked another block before Now made a realization and stopped moving weight. You cleaned up the beach? Oh shit. He immediately started rubbing the back of his head out of embarrassment as a blush formed and grew on his cheeks. Yeah, I did. My trainer said it would be good for me, and that since I'm aiming to become a hero that it'd be my first act as one, helping out the community and all. Huh, nice, was all she said before they continued walking. They couldn't walk forever though, and eventually had to part ways. They waved each other off after making sure that Izuku knew where Nao's apartment was. Izuku continued his walk to the beach. Eventually he arrived, early by a few minutes as always. He took a seat on a bench nearby the entrance while he waited. He took his phone out and was playing a simple strategy game, since reaction-based games weren't all that interesting for someone who could literally think at the speed of sound. Eventually, All Might arrived, and they exchanged greetings before he put up a hand and asked proudly, "Shall we get started?" They stood facing each other in silence. The wind rustled Izuku's hair, making him realize he should get a haircut soon, otherwise it could get in the way when he runs. But that was for another time. Right then, Mr. Yagi became All Might as he buffed up. He reached up a hand to his hair and further up to the top of one of his usually hanging bangs. He plucked a hair and dramatically moved it down to waist height, his anyways, and towards Izuku. The awe in the atmosphere was completely ruined by the man's next words, "Eat this." What? Was all Izuku could say as his idol and trainer held out on of his hairs for him to eat? All Might, while I'm definitely a fan and I know you know that I think this is a little. He immediately began rambling before he was cut off by All Might young Midoriya. I understand your apprehension. I too was once where you are now, being offered this power. Frankly, I think this is disgusting too, but the only way for you to receive one for all is by consuming some of my DNA, and I thought this would be the least disgusting way to go about it. It was frankly almost a word vomit. Izuku was barely paying attention because he was still reeling from the shock of him being told to eat a hair. He nodded lightly. All right then. He reached out and grabbed the golden hair. As he was working up the courage to swallow it, All Might spoke again. Remember, this is your last chance to deny this power. I completely understand if it's too much for you, and I will not force you to go through with it. Izuku hesitated, but only for a moment before he nodded and looked at his mentor resolutely. He closed his eyes and practically shoved the hair down his throat. He gulped. Got any water on you? He asked desperately. Oh no, sorry. Guess I didn't really think that through. All Might answered nervously before he deflated into his civilian form. So, when will the power manifest? Izuku asked, raring to get started. Probably not for another few hours since you still have to digest the hair. Mr. Yagi started, before remembering the more than slightly adverse reaction Izuku had to being told to eat the hair. It'll probably be sooner than that, but we don't have much time. I guess we can start training tomorrow. I'll do some meditation tonight, just in case, Izuku said. Have you let your mother know that you came to the beach to speak with me? Mr. Yagi asked. I'll do that now, Izuku exclaimed as he grabbed his phone and navigated his way to his mother's contact. After some back and forth between the two Midoriyas for a few minutes, Izuku pocketed his phone and looked at Mr. Yagi before he said, My mom said that she hasn't met you under good circumstances yet, so she's invited you to dinner. Only if you want to, though. Izuku quickly added the last part on. Mr. Yagi seemed to think about it for a few seconds before a smile came across his gaunt features, and he said, "I'd love to." And with that, the two of them made their way back to Izuku's house. By the time Izuku had arrived home with Mr. Yagi, his mother was home and had already started on dinner. He led Mr. Yagi to the living room before he went to his room to get changed into clothes he could run in comfortably. He said his goodbyes to the two adults and ran to Nao's apartment to pick her up. He arrived a few seconds later and knocked on her door. He heard footsteps for a few seconds before the lock on the door started shaking and rattling. The hinges creaked a little as the door opened a crack before a big blue eye peeked through it. "Give me a minute," was all Izuku heard before the door closed. "Patience. It's not that she's slow, it's just that you're fast." Eventually, the door opened again to reveal Nao wearing a pink shirt underneath a light pink sweater with a sort of frilly white skirt with a similar length to her school one. Izuku was shell-shocked. "What?" Nao sounded irritated. "I just didn't expect you to wear something so stereotypically girly." That earned him a punch to the face. "Shut up now, are you going to take me to your place, or—" Her stomach interrupted her with a loud rumbling. "Just take me to your place already," she said, with a bright red blush of embarrassment on her face as she looked down to the ground. Izuku went over to her and picked her up in a princess carry, his left hand under back, while his right hand was under her knees. "Strange, I thought women wore BR. His face went so red it looked like it'd explode. "What?" Nao asked, seemingly having recovered from her bout of embarrassment from before. Nodding, "Nothing at all." His voice cracked partway through his declaration of denial, which gave him away. "Don't lie to me. What is it?" Damn, he hated it when she interrogated him. I expected you to be. You know. Please don't make me say it." He had a pleading look in his eyes when he looked to her. She glared at him sharply in return, as if to say, "Spit it out." "I thought all women wore bras." Her eyes widened comically while her previously dealt with blush came back full force. "Just run," was all she said. "Take a deep breath and hold it, please. I don't know how other people are affected by super speed, and the last thing I want is for you to suffocate." She took a deep breath and closed her eyes as she was told, and Izuku promptly started running. It took a little longer to get back with the extra weight, but only by about a quarter of a second. They were in front of his apartment door soon enough and tapped Nao on the shoulder as best he could to let her know she could open her eyes and breathe again. She did as much and quickly voiced her opinion. "What the fuck?" "What?" Izuku was thoroughly confused. "I didn't even feel you move. 1 second we're in front of my door, then a small shake, and a few seconds later we're at your place. I don't even feel sick. That's interesting. Might need to test that more." "Well, it's a good thing you're not sick, right? I think it's fine. Let's head inside." Izuku gestured to the door, which he remembered leaving unlocked. It was as her hand touched the handle he remembered, "Oh, and my trainer is having dinner with us. I hope you don't mind." She paused. "Sure. He's just another person. As long as Midoriya is fine with it." Now shrugged as she opened the door to head inside. "Midoriya?" "Yeah. Your mom is like a mom for everyone. It also sort of fits into your last name." "Right. Whatever floats your boat, I guess." To say that Yagi Tashinori, Izuku's trainer, was a tall man would be an understatement. Now knew she was short, standing around 1.6 meters tall. But the man was easily over 2 meters in height. The shock from his height quickly changed to shock over his appearance. The short version, he looked like he'd drop dead any second. The long version, his eyes were so sunken, they could be pool sockets. He was so thin his arms could almost be used as chopsticks. His overall gaunt face could be used as material for a horror movie under the right lighting. She greeted the man quickly, still marveling at the fact he was somehow still alive. There was, however, a feeling in the back of her mind that she had seen him somewhere before. She chalked it up to Izuku having showed her a picture of him at some point during the short time they've been friends. She took a seat at the dinner table, on which plates and cutlery was already set out. She could feel herself reverting back to her shy self in the presence of the strange man. As they waited for the food to be ready, the blonde man decided to strike up a conversation with her, and Izuku, "So, what's the relationship between you two?" Because we can't be having distractions since we'll be upping the intensity of your training soon, young Midoriya. Izuku sputtered at the implications while Midoriya chuckled from the kitchen. Now herself was now blushing heavily. Nothing like that, we're just friends, sir, she managed to force out. Just checking, young Tamori. You two seem very close as all. Mr. Yagi reassured her. Well, it sounded like reassurance anyways, but there seemed to be something in his voice that hinted at something else she couldn't quite pick out. After another bout of silence, Midoriya finally brought the food to the table. Smells like. Is that beef noodle stir-fry? Her question was soon answered when the wok was placed atop a wooden board in the center of the table. It was indeed beef noodle stir-fry. After taking her portion from the wok, Inko set out an order of progression for everyone to take some food for themselves. Like always, now ended up with the largest portion, but Izuku's trainer strangely didn't take much at all. He must have noticed her staring because he asked, is something the matter, young Tamori? No, it's just you don't seem to be eating much, she said, sounding uninterested despite being quite interested. What she said seemed to pique Midoriya's interest though, since she was leaning forward slightly while she watched Mr. Yagi intently. His eyes widened subtly. That's because of an injury that made me lose my stomach. But that's old now, there's no need to worry about it. He tried waving off her concerns. But while he was busy looking at now while he said that, he missed how Inko's aura changed. She seemed to radiate some sort of motherly rage. A low rumbling noise of unknown origins could be heard. When Mr. Yagi turned back to his minuscule amount of food, he must have caught a glimpse of Midoriya, because he suddenly started shrinking in on himself as if he was trying to hide. Mr. Yagi, why didn't you tell me about your special dietary needs? Her voice was calm, but it was dripping with anger. Pardon. I didn't know there were any, he said meekly. Inko's aura dampened slightly, but was very much still there. Well then, starting from tomorrow you'll follow a special diet. If you'll give me your email, then I will send you a list of recipes for you. And I expect you to do everything it says. Do you understand? While the woman wasn't talking to either Izuku or Now, they both cowered slightly at her tone. They could only imagine what Mr. Yagi was going through. Midoriya Inko was, as far as Tashinori was concerned, the perfect woman. Beautiful, smart, capable, strong. Of all the things he expected from the woman upon hearing about his lack of a stomach, it was not anger. He was currently sweating bullets and cowering in fear. When she told him that he was going to be changing his diet, he didn't argue, only nodded and wrote his contact info on a piece of paper and handed it to the woman. The moment he did, the atmosphere completely changed and he released a breath he didn't know he was holding in. I look forward to what you have in store for me, Mrs. Midoriya, Tashinori said shakily. Good, and please, call me Inko. She smiled. They finished dinner in silence. He was secretly amazed that young Tamori ate more than Midoriya. He had no idea where it went. Once dinner was finished, Tashinori was on his way home, but not before he said his farewells to Inko and young Midoriya and his friend, who was given a lift home by Midoriya. Overall, he had had a good night. Like he had said he would, Izuku meditated. He found himself in the same void, but instead of one pinprick of green in the distance, there were two. Only, one seemed to keep moving around while the other seemed to fluctuate in size. Izuku approached them. He got closer and saw the same green box of energy he had seen the previous night. Not too far away was something similar, though it looked far more volatile and was constantly changing colors. He reached out to touch the new one, and it moved towards him as well, but right before they made contact, an invisible wall appeared. Upon closer inspection, Izuku could see the odd-minute spark. He looked to the original energy source and realized it had actually shrunk ever so slightly. Is One for All trying to merge with it, but it won't let it? Actually, I think it's more important to come up with a name for the damn thing first. Ah shit, nothing comes to mind. Maybe later. He tried reaching out to the first source, and there was no obstruction from anywhere. He completely squashed his body against it. He had no idea if it would do anything, but at that point, anything was worth a shot. Even dancing and singing. He continued to hug the big green power source for what felt like forever, until he started sinking into it. Surprised, he jumped back away from it and saw an imprint of himself in it. Said imprint slowly got filled, which was kind of unnerving, but there wasn't really anything he could do about it other than look away, which he did. He turned back to what he presumed was one for all. He reached out for it again and wasn't met with an invisible barrier like he expected. He made contact with it, and sparks began to come off his body, which was similar to what happened when he used the first source, only instead of being around him, it was on him. The feeling he got from One for All was different too. The first source felt energizing, powerful, while One for All felt inspiring and determined. Does that have something to do with the fact that it's passed on from person to person, or he stopped when he heard a voice? It was familiar yet not. His shock from the unexpected event was so strong he woke up. Again, it was already morning, though he wasn't almost late for school. He got ready for school and had breakfast before he made his way to Nao's house so they could walk to school together. On the way, he messaged Mr. Yagi. Mr. Yagi. You. So I meditated last night. Mr. Yagi. How did it go, young Midoriya? You. Well, you remember when that villain attacked us and there was that weird lightning around me? Mr. Yagi. Yes. What does that have to do with your meditation? You. Turns out that it's some sort of power source, like One for All. Only thing is, when I meditated last night, One for All looked like it was trying to merge with it, but it didn't let it. And when I tried touching One for All, the power source stopped me. You. Oh, and right before I woke up, I heard a voice from One for All. Mr. Yagi. What did it say? You. I don't know. I could barely hear it. I only know it came from Ofa because I was closer to it than the power source when I heard it. Mr. Yagi. Strange. We should talk about it more this afternoon. You. Actually, I was wondering if maybe we could start the training this weekend. I would like to meditate more to try and figure it out myself, if that's no problem. Mr. Yagi. I see no problems with that, young Midoriya. I'll see you at the beach Saturday morning, then meet me there early, so that no one else is around. You. Thank you, sir. I'll see you then. In the nights he spent meditating leading up to the weekend, Izuku made absolutely zero progress with his quirk and One for All. Luckily, his mother knew that he was going to train with Mr. Yagi early in the morning, so she didn't leave her room when he left the house at the ungodly hour of 4 a.m. As Izuku arrived approximately 30 minutes later, since he didn't run there, he saw that Mr. Yagi was already there and waiting for him. There goes my perfect record of arriving before him. Hey, Mr. Yagi, I'm here. The man looked away from the sea to look at Izuku. Izuku swore he saw a smile on the man's face, but was distracted when he started talking. Greetings, young Midoriya. Now, are you ready to get started? We have the beach to ourselves for a couple of hours at least. Izuku barely managed to keep his nods to a visible speed. All right then, first things first, tell me about your meditation. How did this power source and One for All interact? And what was the voice you heard like? Well, like I mentioned in my text, it looked like One for All was trying to merge with the power. You did say One for All is a stockpile of power, so that makes sense. But what was strange was the power source retaliated. It moved away from One for All and did everything it could to not merge. It also wouldn't let me make contact with One for All by making some sort of barrier or just plain pushing me away. Over the past few nights in my meditation sessions, I walked up to the source and just pushed myself into it, which ended up leaving an impression. And then it would fill in the spot where I was. And during that time, I could interact with One for All, which was when I heard the voices. Mr. Yagi had a contemplative look on his face. By the sounds of it, you won't be able to use One for All until you can make some sort of agreement with this power or something. Though you might be able to brute force it, we can try that later. Now, earlier you said there was a voice, but just then you said there were voices. Could you please explain? Right, so? I wasn't really paying attention when it happened the first time, but when I got touched by One for All, there were voices. It sounded like there were quite a few of them, but they said everything at the same time, so it's hard to say how many. And the sparking from One for All and the power source made it hard to tell what they were saying. Sorry, but that's all I could get from 3 nights of meditating. Izuku checked the time on his phone and saw that it was already almost 5. That's quite all right, young Midoriya. Now, should we try getting One for All to work? He asked, clearly already knowing the answer, if the look in his eyes were saying anything. Yes, sir. It was way harder than he thought it would be. They'd been at it for an hour already, and nothing worked. He clenched his ass cheeks and yelled smash as he swung his arm, but nothing happened. not even a spark. He focused intently, trying to get that determined feeling he had when he touched One for All, but again, it was fruitless. He even tried meditating, which was almost successful after he did the thing he normally does, but the moment he opened his eyes, it went away. Mr. Yagi, I'm not sure if we're going to be making any progress anytime soon, Izuku said, sounding deflated compared to his enthusiasm from an hour prior. Don't worry, young Midoriya, I'm sure you'll get it eventually, Mr. Yagi sounded jovial. But there was an edge to his tone that betrayed how disheartened he was by the lack of progress. I think I may need to focus on meditation for a while. I'll let you know when I think I've made a breakthrough, Izuku suggested before he let out a deep sigh. If you think that's the best course of action, then please do your best to make headway, Mr. Yagi announced. With that, the two of them parted ways. Izuku walked back home dejected, thinking of ways he could get One for All to work, but came up empty every time. He got home without much fanfare and had a cold shower. He got dressed into more casual clothes, and after finishing his homework and organizing a meetup time to hang out with Now, he sat in the middle of his bedroom floor and meditated. He was soon met with the same black void he had acquainted himself with over the previous 4 days. He searched for the usual green powerhouses and made his way over. He stood in front of them and observed. He wanted to first control One for All, then later he could learn to control his power source. Thing is, he couldn't make a connection with One for All without first distracting the power source with whatever fixing that indentation is. It was as he was about to touch the power source that he realized One for All was more tame than it had been earlier that morning and every other time he had meditated. Curious, he instead walked over to it and reached out a hand. One for All sent small sparks of energy like usual towards him, but instead of getting blocked, they made contact with his skin. The usual feeling of determination was there, but it felt more concentrated, like it was being properly focused and controlled. Izuku opened his eyes and saw red veins across his exposed skin, which reached underneath his clothing. At the same time, there were small erratic sparks dancing along his body. The moment he tried to get up, though, he was covered in pain, and he fell forward onto his hands and knees. He looked to his arms, still sparking, and saw bruises forming and healing rapidly. One for All must be boosting my regeneration while it destroys my body. His breathing was getting desperate and heavy, which wasn't helped with his efforts to keep his screams of anguish in. The moment he had a moment of clarity, he disconnected himself from One for All. Looks like we can get started earlier than I thought. I'll just have to focus on the output level, Izuku said to himself. He grabbed his phone and sent Mr. Yagi a message saying that by some miracle, he had made progress after arriving home. He checked the time to see that he had 10 minutes before he had to meet Now at their chosen meeting spot. Izuku had lucked out and made it to the meeting spot a minute early. But that wasn't what he lucked out on. It was that Now made it a point to arrive at the exact time stated. He looked around the courtyard of the mall and spotted her making her way through the crowd. Before he could say anything, Now had a look of disgust on her face and voiced it, "So what are you wearing?" He looked down at his t-shirt with the words, "dress shirt" on the front. He looked farther down to his light brown cargo pants, then down to his bright red sneakers. Comfortable clothes? I came here to hang out, not get called out, Izuku said jokingly. Her disgusted look was mostly gone after she heard that, but it was still there. She closed the gap and kicked him in the left shin, her usual greeting after he's done something stupid. How was your training this morning? She asked. Good. Actually, that's a lie. I made zero progress. I'm sure that progress will come eventually. Now let's go watch that movie. Now tugged on his arm in the direction of the cinema. They began their walk towards it in silence. Eventually, though, Now asked an unexpected question. You sent in the UA application form yet? After recovering, Izuku answered not yet. Haven't even taken a look yet. UA is changing to a boarding school, was all she said. It took Izuku a few seconds to actually register it, though. Seriously? You gonna take it? Izuku asked, disbelief in his tone. She seemed to contemplate his question for a few seconds before opening her mouth to answer probably. You need a guardian signature, though, so it depends on if my parents are fine with it. They got to the counter and bought their tickets for the movie, which was a rerun of some pre-Quirk era sci-fi action movie. Izuku didn't bother remembering its name. Well, you can at least use my mom's phone number as an emergency contact instead of theirs. Besides, I think moving into their dorms would be good for you. Get some friends other than me. At her pointed glare, he quickly continued, "Not that I don't appreciate your friendship or anything, I just think everyone should have more than one friend is all." Whatever, let's watch this movie." They found their seats and sat down. Izuku didn't really understand any of it. It didn't make much sense to him. What were the antagonist's motives? Why didn't the protagonist just blow up the base instead of whatever it was they were doing if they were going to kill the bad guy anyways? He really didn't understand pre-Quirk era movies. The movie eventually ended and now had never seemed more happy since he met her, which admittedly wasn't that long ago, but that's irrelevant. He walked her home, despite his offers to give her a lift the whole way. After he got home, he finally took a look at the UA application form and saw that indeed, UA was turning into a boarding school, which did require the signature of a legal guardian. He took his time to go through the form and gave pause when he got to the "Is there anything else we should know?" section. He quickly wrote something down before he got up to give his mother the form to fill everything else in. Izuku met Mr. Yagi at the beach the next day at the same time, and they got started on training. It started with Izuku making the connection with One for All and going into the same state he did in his room. It was an on and off process that they made no progress with. Every morning of every weekend, no matter the weather and/or temperature, Izuku met with Mr. Yagi to train. There were no signs of progress after every session until about 4 weeks in. "I think I'll try something different today, sir," Izuku said, sounding determined. "Go ahead," was all he got as a reply. Izuku closed his eyes and was immediately confronted by his now-named Speed Force and One for All. Over the weeks, he had realized that the Speed Force was taming One for All, which was why he could make a connection with it at all. Weirdly though, his Speed Force seemed to be shrinking or getting used up since the box was the same size, but the amount of energy, for lack of a better word, kept shrinking. Regardless, his new idea involved him making a connection with the Speed Force, which he hadn't been successful with in any capacity, and One for All at the same time. He reached out his left hand to the Speed Force and his right to One for All. He was met with the same familiar feeling of determination and will from One for All, and the not-so-familiar feeling of power from the Speed Force. He opened his eyes and saw One for All sparking around just his right arm. "That's new. Normally it forces itself all across my body. Well, let's hope this works." He swung his arm to imitate a punch and was met with the usual pain, but it wasn't nearly as intense as it usually was. It was only after he heard Mr. Yagi cheering that he realized he had created a small trench in the beach sand in the direction of his punch, all the way to the water. "How long did it take me, sir?" Izuku breathed out. Apparently, using One for All took more out of him than he thought. "A little over 5 minutes. While that is a long time, you've made progress, young Midoriya," Mr. Yagi exclaimed. And like that, Izuku had been training to use One for All without his quirk for another month. He had managed to get the charge-up time down to about 3 seconds, but he could still only focus it on one limb. He always used too much power otherwise. Power his body wasn't used to. Mr. Yagi surmised that he had access to around 10% of One for All, and that if he could use it in his whole body, he might be able to push that up naturally. But it was a shocker to Izuku when he felt something push on his hair. On instinct, Izuku went super speed, and the world slowed down. He moved forward a little before he turned around to see a yellow. "Is that a boot? Why is there a hole in it?" Izuku stepped to the side and let the owner of the boot continue on his way. Said owner exclaimed as he landed in the sand. Mr. Yagi froze before he started shaking. He looked like he had the fear of God in his eyes. "Gran Torino, well, what are you doing here?" he asked shakily. The boot owner, now known as Gran Torino, stood up and dusted himself off. "I came to knock some sense into your successor. After that letter you sent me, I had my doubts about your teaching ability, Toshi." Izuku's eyes widened when he heard that. Gran Torino knew about One for All? Kid stopped muttering. "It's creepy." "Sorry," he said meekly. "So, did you use One for All to do that?" Gran Torino asked. "Oh no, that was my quirk, sir. Without One for All, I can travel speeds from Mach 1 to Mach 2 and can process information just as fast. I'm not exactly sure how fast I can go, but I'd like to find out. I have a few other abilities, but my quirk is centered around my speed." Izuku saw Gran Torino look impressed, but it didn't last long as he quickly went back into his grumpy old man persona and asked, "And where are you at with One for All?" Mr. Yagi said he thinks I can use about 10% of one for all right now. To prove his point, Izuku powered up his right arm for a few seconds before releasing it. Mr. Yagi had a betrayed look on his face, as if mentioning him to Gran Torino would be his end. Gran Torino glared at Mr. Yagi for a few seconds before it was Izuku's turn to get glared at. Izuku could barely keep himself from quaking underneath the man's gaze. And why, pray tell, are you using one for all so poorly? What do you mean? Do you need me to spell it out for you? Why are you only using it in one limb? And that charge-up time you're not using your head, you numbskull. Izuku officially listed the man as terrifying, right beneath his mother when she was mad. I can't use it on my whole body. Last time I tried, my body couldn't handle it. And how am I supposed to change the charge-up time? It won't get any shorter than it already is. Tashinori said you were smart. Prove to me he was right, was all Gran said back before he shot over to the nearest bench and sat down to watch. Izuku stared at him in the hopes to get something more out of the old man. And after several minutes, he finally got something. Do you think All Might is All Might all the time or something? Cost that's so helpful. Damn, old man, what do you mean? Do you think All Might is All Mig? Oh, alright then. Izuku closed his eyes and focused. He connected with One for All, and the familiar sound of sparking met his ears. He opened his eyes to see his arm the same as always when he used One for All. He fired off a punch, but instead of releasing his it like normal, he kept a hold of One for All. It was stable. How did I not think of this earlier? He said quietly. Now all you need to do is use a few more brain cells and get that going on the rest of you, Gran said to him, but there was no bite to his words. Yes, sir, Izuku said, more determined than he'd ever been since he got One for All. Izuku got back to work, but made no progress for the rest of the day. They were busy doing their homework after school when Izuku spoke up. How are you feeling about U.A? Kind of nervous, but at least I don't have to do some crazy practical exam. Now answered simply. The room was filled with silence again. How's your training going? He always seems tired afterwards, but there's definitely more to it. Slow, but I think by the time the practical exam comes around I should be good. Izuku answered, not looking up from his work which he should have already finished, but per some agreement they made he kept pace with her. Cool. I've been meaning to ask, by the way, when are you going to get new clothes? She finally looked up from her work and saw him dressed casually, wearing cargo pants and another tacky shirt which he seemed to have an infinite supply of. I don't mind the eye candy, and I'm sure the other girls don't either, but there's no way that those are comfortable. At first glance his clothes were fine, but upon closer inspection one could see his well-developed muscles through his shirt. His shorts became tight short shorts after his growth spurt. He stopped working and leaned back in his seat a little. He looked down at his clothes. You're right. I probably should get some new clothes soon. Want to go shopping this weekend? I also need a new haircut, and since I'm dragging you along you can pick it out. No, you can't get rid of that fluffy hair. Her indignation must have shown on her face because he immediately asked, is that not good enough? Do I need to let you pick out my clothes too? And oh, why are you getting a haircut? No matter who you ask, anyone and everyone will tell you to leave your hair alone. What? Why? He looked genuinely confused. The fool. Your hair is soft, that's why if you get it cut, then you'll lose one of your best qualities. She hoped the message would get through to him. But alas, his obliviousness knows no bounds. Then I won't get it all cut off? Is that good enough? Why is she so angry? She sighed. Fine. I guess that'll work. Just help me with this problem. And with that out of the way, the two of them went back to their homework, the air slightly tense. It took a while, but eventually, Izuku got One for All to work on his whole body without killing him. Mr. Yagi estimated he could use around 15% of One for All like that, compared to the 10% he could use on a single part of his body. Izuku didn't know how One for All affected him exactly, but he knew that it enhanced him. He also finally got some new clothes that actually fit him. He almost got away with getting his usual shirts, but now caught him every time, due to her using her quirk to help keep an eye on him whenever he disappeared. Though, Izuku noticed that people gave the two of them weird looks every so often. At some point, he actually did some testing with what now told him about what it felt like when he ran with her in his arms or on his back. He started with a glass of water and moved around at super speeds and noted that it acted as though he were moving at normal speeds. He then used the same glass of water and put on the counter and gave it a small push away from him. The same thing as before happened. It acted like it was moving at normal speeds. Izuku came to the conclusion that he had a passive emitter capability to keep people and objects in a sort of inertia-like state. It didn't cross his mind to check how gravity affected him at super speeds. Before Izuku knew it, though, the entrance exams for UA were upon them. First was the general written exam. Then a week later, the practical exam for the hero course would take place. He was positively excited but also extremely nervous at the same time, since he didn't know what it would entail. He knew that he could probably pass without One for All, and definitely could with, but that didn't help quell his worries. Regardless, he spent every day training with One for All to shrink down the charge-up time so he could turn it on while running, and to increase how much of it he could use. He wasn't making much leeway, but he'd have much more time after the exam to train, both in and out of UA. He just hoped that now got in. He knew how much it meant to her that she got in, so he helped her as much as she would let him, but he knew that nerves could always mess with you. He also hoped that UA had a film and media elective, otherwise all her work could have been for nothing. Izuku didn't bother to check since he was going into the hero course, which had its own compulsory classes on top of regular ones, which would leave him without any time for electives. He just hoped nothing would go wrong. Chapter 5. It looks like they're only getting faster from here, folks. The written exam was a breeze for Izuku. He made sure not to use his quirk when answering any questions, since it was against the rules and it would be obvious. He did, however, use his quirk when he was solving, since there was likely no easy way for them to monitor students using quirk that affected processing speed and/or power. He had already studied extensively, so he was confident, but the nervousness still laid at the back of his mind, chewing at him, until he got in the exam anyways. He took his seat, and once they were given the go-ahead to start, he took a look at each paper and had to hold in a huff of air at the simplicity of each question. But that was a week ago. Now, Izuku was walking through the gates of UA again to take the practical exam for the hero course. He was several steps in before he stopped to admire the sheer presence the front building had, until someone decided he wasn't worth walking around and slammed a shoulder into him as they walked past. "Get out of the way, Deku." Izuku turned to look at the familiar source of the familiar voice. "Bakugo Katsuki. Good morning to you too, Katsuki," was all he said before he took a step to the side, not wanting to cause a scene. Katsuki had actually been quite tame after the day he became friends with now, not trying to bully either of them. To their faces anyway. He watched the back of the other boy for a few seconds before deciding that it was as good a time as any to make his way inside for the briefing. Or at least, he tried. His leading foot got caught on his other leg, and he started to fall forward. Time slowed. He retracted his caught foot and redid his step. Fortunately, he hadn't fallen far, so it would probably only look like he stumbled. Time resumed. Did that come from behind me? Izuku chanced to look behind him and saw a short girl, a little shorter than now. She had brown hair cut short and styled into a gravity-defying bob, with two longish bangs framing her simple but cute face. She had beautiful brown eyes, and on each cheek was a small pink blush, which looked permanent. She had a hand extended in his direction slightly, as if she was going to grab him or something. "Is something the matter?" he asked as he turned to face her fully. "Ah, no. It just looked like you were going to fall, but then you didn't." Was she watching me? "I see. Well, I'm fine, thank you. I think we should head into the hall though, don't you think?" Izuku half-turned and gestured with his right hand towards the UA building. She didn't say anything, instead opting to nod fervently before running ahead of him. What a strange, beautiful girl. I hope she makes it in. The hall was lit up lightly when he walked in. After doing some soul-searching, he found his assigned seat, which unfortunately happened to be next to Katsuki. He took his seat, but not without getting reprimanded angrily for even being there by Katsuki. Soon after, the lights dimmed until they were off, leaving spotlights aiming towards the stage down at the front of the room. There was a dramatic explosion of fog that dissipated quickly and revealed none other than the voice hero, present Mike, standing in front of a giant screen which displayed the UA logo on a blue background. The man wore black leather pants held up by a red belt, paired with an unviewable shirt which was underneath a black leather jacket with red studded elbow pads. Around his neck looked like a speaker of some kind, and he wore triangular sunglasses with headphones on his head. To complete the look, he styled his long blonde hair curving backwards and upwards, making him seem like a personification of a cockatiel. Welcome to today's live performance. Examinee listeners, everybody say, "Hey, present." Mike sounded excited. To his disappointment, he was met with complete and utter silence. Well, isn't that a refined response? His voice was strained as he tried to stay energetic. "I'm here to give you a rundown of the practical exam. Are you ready?" He asked again, attempting to elicit a response. Not even a cough, sniffle, or sneeze was heard. Meanwhile, Izuku was fanboying as quietly as he could. "Oh my god, it's present Mike. I listen to his radio show every week. It's inspiring. Maybe all the teachers are UA are pro heroes." Izuku's words were heard loud and clear by the person to his right, however, and he received an angry "shut the fuck up, Deku." Present Mike was oblivious to the entire thing as it says on the application requirements. You listeners will be conducting 10-minute-long mock urban battles after this. After he finished the first part, a picture appeared on the screen behind the man. A box with the words "You are here" in it. Then 7 lines branching off to 7 more boxes spaced evenly above it, each labeled from A through to G. Mike pressed on "You can bring whatever you want with you, and after this presentation you'll each head to your assigned testing location. Okay?" He was met with silence, which angered the man. "Okay?" Katsuki quietly spoke. "Not really to anyone, so kids from the same school can't help each other out, huh?" Izuku didn't bother responding, instead trying to make sure he didn't mutter again. The last thing he wanted was to be reprimanded for that. Getting over himself, Present Mike continued with the explanation. "There are 3 kinds of faux villains in each battle center." Behind him a block appeared with a few buildings on top. As he talked, 3 silhouettes appeared around the buildings, each labeled from 1P through to 3P. Different amounts of points are rewarded based on their level of difficulty. A short 2D pixel game-styled animation of Mike appeared on the screen. Pixel Mike moved forward until he came across a robot, recognized as the one-pointer, before he defeated it and moved on. A number at the top right of the screen changed from 0 to 1. That repeated for the final 2 types of robots. Your goal, dear listeners, is to use your quirks to earn points by immobilizing the faux villains. Of course, attacking other examinees and other unheroic actions are prohibited. A student in front of Izuku stood up as he raised his hand. All before he spoke, "May I ask a question?" A spotlight turned on and focused on the young man. "Okay." On the printout, there are 4 types of villains, yet you have only mentioned 3. If this is a misprint, then UA, the most prestigious school in Japan, should be ashamed of that foolish mistake. We examinees are here because we wish to be molded into exemplary heroes. He isn't wrong about that last part, but man who drove that stick up his ass was all Izuku could wonder. Thank you. Examinee 7111. The 4th type of villain is worth 0 points. A new robot silhouette appeared on the screen after it returned to the previous display. It had a label above it which said 0P. That guy's an obstacle, so to speak. There's one in every battle center. An obstacle that will go crazy in narrow spaces. It's not impossible to defeat, but there is no merit in doing so either. I recommend all you listeners try to avoid it. Thank you very much. Please excuse the interruption. The boy bowed at what looked to be a perfect 90-degree angle before he stood up straight and sat back down, after which the spotlight on him turned off. That's all from me. I'll leave you listeners a present. Our school motto, the hero, Napoleon Bonaparte once said. A true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. Go beyond. Plus ultra now. Everyone, good luck suffering. Over the next 15 minutes, Izuku and the other examinees got changed into their preferred clothing for the exam. He had no choice but to use his old jumpsuit because he had apparently forgotten to buy himself some new exercise clothes when he went shopping with Now. Once everyone was done, they were on the bus to the battle center in which their exam was to take place. Ida Tinya liked to think that he knew right and wrong in every instance. He liked to think that people would go to him to decide if what they were doing or what they were planning to do was right or not. He was proud of that. He did know that he was often called a party pooper and stiff, that he should loosen up, but he never bothered to try because he was too busy training to be a hero. Now, he was preparing for the exam that would start soon. He looked around at his fellow examinees. He noticed one with his green hair cut in a similar fashion to his own, wearing a green tracksuit that was far too small for his size and build. You could easily see his well-developed musculature through his jacket, and his pants were short enough that you could see several centimeters of his ankles. But that's not what caught Tinya's eye about the other boy. It was that said boy was eyeing up another examinee, a girl with short brown hair. The girl looked nervous, and the green net looked like he was going to walk up to her to distract her from the task at hand. Looks like it's up to me to stop him. Tinya began to make his way. He managed to get to the other by right as he took a step towards the girl. That girl seems to be trying to calm down. Are you intending to interfere? That was probably a little too loud, but I need to get the message across. The boy turned around and stood to his full height, which made him taller than Tinya by a few centimeters. No, I met her back at the gate, and I thought I might help her. Talking to people can help calm you down, and her meditating doesn't seem to be helping. Tinya was about to say something when he heard the familiar voice of Present Mike yell begin Tinya, and everyone else looked up to the source, which was a tower in the direction they had come from. No one moved. Tinya looked around before he realized that the green net he was talking to was gone. Present Mike was talking, but he wasn't listening. He instead looked inside the battle center and saw robot parts strewn across the streets. Did they self-destruct? Or did that boy do it? But he can't be that fast, can he? Tinya turned around in time to see the other examinees start running to the battle center. Not wanting to fall behind, he started to run in as well. He was at the back of the group, but he knew that the moment they were inside, everyone would split up and he'd be able to let loose. The moment he heard Present Mike yell begin, he was confused just like everyone else. But he didn't stick around long enough to question it. If he was given the go-ahead, then he'd go. He activated One for All and ran. He still hadn't quite gotten used to the new speed, since with the 15% he had control over, he could tell he could already go more than twice as fast compared to without it. He came across a pair of robots near the entrance that were relatively small. 2 pointers. He ran to the nearest one and tore its head off, which he threw at the second one and embedded it in its body. 4 points. Izuku planned on stopping one. He got 50 points, since that was likely to be around the cutoff. But since there wasn't much else he could do with the spare time, he was going to help out the other examinees. After all, what hero school didn't award people for being heroic? He had to get to that stage first, though. The 1-pointers were pretty weak, compared to the other 2 robots. But they were fast, or they should have been, but they may as well have been standing still for Izuku. He made short work of those, since it was much easier to dismantle them. The only thing that Izuku may have had trouble with was probably the rubber bullets the robots fired. Thing was, the robots had to know he was there to fire, so his speed kept him safe from that. The 2-pointers were tougher, with 4 armored legs, a long tail, and a head atop a long neck. Those ones seemed to be equipped with missile launchers instead of Gatling guns like the 1-pointers, but they were tankier compared to them, so it made sense. If only they posed a challenge. The 3-pointers were a different story altogether. The tankiest of the robots so far, and equipped with missiles and a Gatling gun that shot rubber rounds. The only thing that kept Izuku safe was again his speed, but he could only take apart the 3-pointers without breaking himself due to the power-up from One for All. In the end, they weren't a match for him. By the 6th second of the start of the exam, Izuku had gotten his 50 points. It only took so long because all the robots were spread so far out from each other. He went back to the entrance and saw that the rest of the examinees had only just gotten started on destroying robots. They must have gotten confused and waited for Present Mike. Izuku took his time and ran up one of the smaller buildings so he could watch everyone. Time resumed. There were people with some interesting quirks. One guy had 3 arms to his side, who was scaling a building not too far from Izuku. The guy that was telling him off before the start of the exam had engines his legs, which indicated he had a mobility quirk like Izuku. Though not quite the same, he continued to watch and saw the girl from the entrance touch a robot before it started floating upwards. She put her fingertips together and said something before the robot fell to the earth, destroyed on impact. She can make things float? Or does it have something to do with gravity? If so, then is she removing the effect of gravity, or does it become weightless? Those are all things I'll have to ask her later. There seems to be a lot of powerful students this year, huh? Claimed one teacher, whose head was rather cuboid. Yeah, thou WH. What? Look at Center B immediately. Everyone changed what site they had showing on their monitors to Battle Center B and saw destruction throughout the center. While that was expected for an exam like that one, it made no sense since the exam had started not even a minute previously. Looks like someone strategically destroyed around 50 points worth of robots. How though, I don't know. A small dog bear rat thing said. Check for telekinesis and teleportation quirks. If there are none, then check for high mobility quirks. He ordered. There was rustling from a few of the staff members for several minutes as they searched through the list of applicants at Site B. I found no applicants with a quirk of the first two types, but there are two with high mobility quirks. Go ahead. The first student is Ida Tenya, Tensei's younger brother? Seems like it. His quirk is engine. It gives him engines in his calves which can be used for increased mobility. And the other? Midoriya Izuku. Quirk super speed. Like Ida, it is a mutant type and grants him immense speed. His top speed is unknown. In his application form, he said we should use high-speed cameras in order to accurately monitor him. I trust that was taken care of, power loader. At the nod of the orange-haired man wearing an excavator claw on his head, he continued, we'll have to keep a close eye on him then. At the back of the room sat a man with long, greasy black hair. He wore a black jumpsuit with a gray scarf wrapped around his neck. Said man looked over to one of his colleagues, who was wearing a skin-tight red suit. He had tubes coming out of his left shoulder to his arm, which had a thick white vambrace on it. His colleague looked back. A silent conversation took place before the man in red eventually conceded. I look forward to teaching you, Midoriya Izuku. He had mostly been saving people who weren't paying enough attention, or because they overextended and got caught up against too many villain bots. He did save a few people who had overused their quirks though, notably a blonde kid who spoke a foreign language every other sentence and could shoot a laser from his gut. This seemed to emit sparkles, which was pretty strange but not the weirdest thing Izuku had seen. He had gotten some points from doing it, which was nice. Not that he needed them, but he estimated that he stood at around 65 points. He could estimate how many points he got from helping people, since that was probably subjective. Not like it mattered anyways. By the 5-minute mark, though, people seemed to get into a groove and there was pretty much no one for him to help. Thus, he opted to sit on top of a building. He watched everyone intently, attempting to figure out who his classmates could be come the start of the year. He had just gotten relaxed, sitting at the edge of a building, when a deep rumble sounded from the other side of the site. A small shake of the building he was on had Izuku up and away from the edge in an instant. There were more shakes, and Izuku took a look around to see if he could find the source. He eventually spotted green and black metal gripping onto the corner of a building. That must be the zero-pointer. Izuku ran down the side of the building once there were no more shakes. He technically shouldn't have been able to, since running down required gravity to assist him, but apparently that was something else he could change the effect of when he moved at super speeds. He reached the ground soon enough and navigated his way to the scene. Upon arrival, Izuku's first thought was, this is a mess. There was rubble falling down from buildings which the monstrously large robot had grabbed onto, and there was copious amounts of dust making its way down. Izuku focused on making sure no one got crushed and did his best to redirect any rubble that looked like it would fall on or near anyone. When he couldn't get to the rubble easily, he just moved the affected examinees slightly so they were out of the way. He noticed, though, that there was a girl in front of the robot. It was the girl from the entrance. She seemed to be trapped under rubble and was right in the path of the robot, which seemed to be reaching for her. He could have easily cleared the rubble and carried her to safety, but he hadn't had the opportunity to really see what he could do with One for All yet, so he felt like showing off a bit. He ran under the hand of the robot, which was getting pretty close, and let time run its course. Everything got very loud the moment he did. The girl was groaning with the effort of trying to get free, and the robot, which was now on top of Izuku, had a very loud engine and equally loud hydraulics. This thing is lighter than it looks, though I don't think I can push it off. Can you use your quirk? He asked the girl. She rapidly shook her head. Looks like I'll have to do my best then. He immediately started vibrating his arms and hands as fast as he could in an attempt to upset the robot's balance, or at least push it back a meter so he could punch it in the face without risking the girl. Not that Yue would let someone die in an exam. He got his leverage a few seconds later after he gave a little shove to speed things up, and he jumped back enough to have a clear path to the robot's big green head. He crouched in preparation to jump. He had to get the height right, otherwise he'd overshoot, but he didn't want to use too little power because then he'd have to hit the most armored part of the damn thing. He released one for all and leaped. He was staring at the robot in the face, not even a second later. He reared back a fist and charged one for all back up and threw his fist forward. The robot's head crumpled and folded in on itself. It started falling backwards as explosions erupted from along its large body. Izuku hoped that there wasn't anyone dumb enough to be that close to the robot, in front of it or not. It was then he realized he had no proper way to land. He could have used air pressure to soften the landing, but that could have also endangered the other examinees. And sure, he had some powerful legs, but he hadn't practiced landing from 8 stories up. He braced for impact and put as much of one for all into his legs as he could so that he could at least regenerate. The last thing he was expecting, though, was for the girl he had saved to slap his back from atop a dead three-pointer's chassis. When he was about to make contact with the ground, there was some sort of burst of air and he started floating. He was unfamiliar with weightlessness, along with the force from the slap had him end up floating upside down. Surprisingly, there was no disruption of blood flow. So that's how her quirk works. I'll need to write this down as soon as I can. He almost landed on his head though when the girl grunted out. Release then promptly turned away to throw up her lunch. He managed to catch himself and was on his feet and next to the girl less than a second later. He comforted her as she got her bearings and rested. Time's up. With those 2 words, the exam was over. Most of the students collapsed and let fatigue overtake them. The girl sighed in relief and Izuku continued to sit with her on the corpse of a robot. Eventually, Recovery Girl arrived to treat anyone she could. Recovery Girl had a few words for him, though. What did you do this time? She walked over to the brunette, and her lips stretched comically to kiss the girl. A pale green light enveloped the girl as his swollen ankle healed. I didn't do anything, I only helped this girl. Izuku defended himself as he gestured to the now tired brunette next to him. And I'm supposed to believe the 0-pointer behind you fell backwards on its own? She stared at him with a glare. Yes? Whatever. It's not like it matters. Just go home so I don't have to see you. Yes, ma'am. What's your name? Izuku turned to the brunette beside him. She smiled and asked again, what's your name? I'd like to at least know the name of the guy that saved me. Oh, my name is Midoriya Izuku, and it's no problem. Uraraka Achiko. Thank you, and nice to meet you, Midoriya. It's all right. I only did the right thing. While the two of them talked, a few meters away stood Ida. He was watching Izuku, and was startled when he saw him appear underneath the hand of the 0-pointer to catch, before he threw it back and destroyed it, saving the girl. If this weren't an exam, I'm sure I would have done the same. Wait, speaking of the exam. Izuku was waiting at the gate of UA for Uraraka. He didn't have to, but he offered to walk her home. He was messaging now about dinner when Uraraka finally arrived. Sorry I took so long, I had something to take care of, she said sheepishly. It's no problem. Shall we go? Izuku asked, but was walking before she even replied. She took a few quick steps to catch up and they walked to the station side by side in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it definitely could have been better. After the station came into view, Izuku finally found it appropriate to ask, so what apartment building are you staying at right now? It's just in the middle of Mizuta-fu. You really don't have to walk me there, you know. Uraraka sounded nervous. It's all right. My friend lives in an apartment building there. I was going to pick her up and walk her to my place for dinner. You can join us if you'd like. Then maybe now can have a girlfriend. I wouldn't want to intrude or anything. No, it's fine. Really. Look, I'll ask my mom and then you can decide, all right. At her nod, he took out his phone and told his mother that they'd be having an extra guest. She was ecstatic that Izuku had a new friend and was very happy to accommodate for another person. She said it's fine. You'll come, right? She nodded again. Why is she so quiet all of a sudden? Where are you from? What makes you think I wasn't born here? They boarded the train as she asked. I just got the feeling you aren't from here. No real reason other than that. He said it plainly, as if anyone and everyone would think that. She stared at him incredulously. Mie Prefecture. My parents own a construction company there, and I'm staying in the apartment until I get my results for the exam. I see. Do you think you passed? I don't think so. I'd like to say that I did, but I only got 28 points. That's quite a bit less than my estimated minimum. Well, she technically saved me after my fall, so I hope that gave her enough points to pass. I'm sure you'll be fine. I'm sure they wouldn't fail someone who saved someone's life. Well, their legs anyway. I didn't do anything though, you're the one that saved me, she cried out, loud enough to get the attention of a few other passengers. Don't you remember giving me a good slap on the back when I fell? If you hadn't, I'm sure I'd have broken my legs. At least. She opened her mouth to say something, but closed it when nothing came to mind. See, look, here's our stop. Let's go. They got off the train and made their way to the apartment building Izuku knew now lived in. Is this where your friend lives? Uraraka asked after they stopped in front of Nao's door. Yeah, something wrong? Izuku asked as he knocked on the door. No, it's just, I live right there. She turned to her left a little and pointed 3 doors down. That's convenient, then you can go get changed. I'll drop off now in the meantime. Then I can pick you up, he smiled his million-watt smile, even though he didn't know it. Are you sure? I mean, I don't take that long to get changed. Of course I'll use my quirk, it'll be done super quick. Literally. They turned to the new voice, which belonged to the now familiar face of Nao, which was peeking from a gap in between the now slightly open door and the door frame. There you are now, you ready to go? Yeah, but is this that Uraraka girl you mentioned? She seems soft. It's adorable and disgusting in a way. Uraraka looked hurt. Don't worry, she doesn't say it to hurt you, she's just a little prickly when it comes to other people our age, Izuku reassured her. If you say so. Well, if you're confident you won't be long, then I'll see you in 5 minutes. Izuku checked his imaginary watch and said, how about 6 seconds? Wait, when did you get faster? Nao asked in disbelief. I didn't train for nothing now. Really? Come on, let's go. Mom's waiting. At that, Nao opened the door fully to reveal her wearing a red shirt with no jacket, a brown skirt, and knee-high boots. It was a very fitting look, despite its overplainness. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her, locking it. Izuku walked over to her and picked her up in a bridal carry. Uraraka's face went bright red, to which Nao put on a smug look, though her face was also slightly red. See you in a few seconds, Uraraka. And he was off. Midoriya disappeared the moment he finished speaking to her, along with his friend, Nao, in his arms. Achiko had barely made it to her front door when she heard the familiar voice of Midoriya behind her. So I'll wait out here for you, yeah? She turned around, and there he was no longer in his school uniform, without his friend. Just how fast is he? All right, I'll be done as quick as possible. Take your time. He smiled. God, that smile was cute. She quickly unlocked her door and all but ran into her apartment, throwing the door shut behind herself. She navigated her way to her room so she could get changed. It was difficult to decide on clothes to wear, since she didn't have anything particularly nice available. In the end, she decided on a pink t-shirt with a pair of loose jorts over some black tights. She wore casual pink high-top sneakers with a white trim. She stepped out her front door and refused to look Midoriya in the face. She locked her door behind her and stood there. Ready to go then? Not trusting her voice to work in her state of embarrassment, she nodded quickly. How would you like me to carry you? On my back? Or like I carried Nao in my arms? She glanced up to his arms, which were barely hidden under overshirt he was wearing. What she could see, though, was densely packed muscle. That would feel him as bad, Achiko. Oh, on your back, please. He smiled again. That smile could power a house for years. He walked over to her before he turned around to face away from her and crouched low enough to let her onto his back. Hop on, was all he said. She fumbled to get on his back, and in the process, came to regret deciding to get on his back. She didn't know what it was about his back, but the muscles there made her want some time to herself. Before she knew what was going on, though, he had his hands under her thighs. He's so gentle, and was standing up. Hold on tight, yeah? Don't want you falling off now. His tone was serious, but he said it in a playful, friendly way. She only nodded, but after realizing he couldn't see her, she gave a quiet yes. Before she knew what he was going to do, there was a weird jolt and the world changed. But before she could even comprehend what was happening, they were standing in front of a completely unfamiliar door. We're here, was all he said, before he crouched again to let her off. She almost whined that he would no longer be holding her. She got off quietly and waited for him to lead her inside, which he did. They walked in, and after some quick introductions with Midoriya's friend, who she found out is named Tamori now, and his mother, who she had taken to calling Mamadoriya. The meal was an extremely delicious katsudon, in celebration of Midoriya completing the exam for Yue. She had a lot of fun. The trip back to her apartment was the same as it was away. It sort of made her feel giddy to know that she was one of only a few people to have experienced being carried by him. Want to exchange numbers? She didn't know where it came from, but the question was out of her mouth before she could stop herself. Midoriya's eyes widened momentarily before he smiled and said sure. So they exchanged numbers. Right before she closed her apartment door, though, Midoriya called out to her. Uraraka, wait, she opened her door back up. I forgot to tell you to close your eyes and stuff when I carried you. You didn't get hurt or anything, right? What? That was a weird thing to ask. No, I was perfectly fine both times. Why? Was something supposed to happen? He looked shocked. He smiled, though, and spoke. No, not at all, it's just there's more to my quirk than I thought is all. She smiled as he disappeared. It still amazed her that he had a super speed quirk and not a teleportation quirk. She had more fun than she thought she would. So much so, she wasn't sure she could care whether she passed the exam or not, though she still did sorely hope she did. Chapter 6. The Move-In. The wait for his exam results was, in short, torturous. He was confident he passed, but everyone had that grain of nervousness that inevitably grew until the results came in. He had distracted himself by hanging out with both Uraraka and Now, but as things always go, his thoughts drifted back to the results. He couldn't talk to Mr. Yagi either, since the man had gone silent, which sort of worried Izuku, but there wasn't anything he could do about it. The week-long wait had passed, and the results were due in soon. It was just him and his mother having dinner that night, since the other two wanted to be there when their results arrived. It was a simple meal, but still good. Afterward, he went to his room and started doing press-ups. He didn't really have a reason to do them, since he could practically go forever before he had to stop. He didn't notice his mom worriedly looking over to him through his door as she walked past to the front door. He did notice, however, when she came running back and seemed to trip over nothing. She slammed his door open completely and called out to him frantically, Izuku. He froze mid-press-up and looked up to his mother with a mostly blank expression, the only emotion being disbelief. At his silence, his mother continued, "It's here, the letter, it's really here." He stood up and grabbed the letter from her outstretched hand silently. He walked over to his desk and placed the letter on it and sat down. He turned to his mother, who was watching intently from her place on the floor, and spoke, "Could I please open it on my own? I understand. I'll go," was all she said before she got up and walked out of his room, closing the door behind her. Izuku knew she would wait outside his door, though. He sighed as he turned back to face the culprit of all his nervousness from the past week. Deciding to get it over and done with, he tore the envelope open. A small silver metal disc with two buttons opposite each other on the side fell out. Not wanting to risk damaging the clearly important device, Izuku grabbed it out of the air and placed it down gently. The moment he did, the device came to life and created a projection. It was a blank white rectangle for about a second before suddenly All Might's face filled the screen with a "I am here" a projection. All Might, I thought this was from Yue. Izuku looked down to the envelope and saw a few pieces of paper, but he focused on the seal of the envelope, which was indeed Yue's. He snapped his head back up when he heard All Might continue speaking. "I'm in town for one reason only. To teach at Yue." He paused. A hand appeared from the side and pointed at where Izuku assumed the camera was. There was a bit of back and forth between All Might and the unknown person, mostly about getting on with it. "Anyways, you passed the written exam with flying colors. With a score of 98%, this would be more than enough to admit you into the general education course. However, you applied for the hero course, and thus took the practical. You earned 50 points. Earning you a place at Yue." Izuku began tearing up and ignored the leaderboard of what he supposed was probably the top 10 scorers for the exam. "That is not all, though. What? Please watch here." All Might grabbed a remote from somewhere and stepped to the side, which revealed a screen with the Yue logo on it. He pressed the only button on the remote. The screen immediately showed Uraraka walking up to what was probably the UA staff room with a worried look on her face. After she got the attention of Present Mike, she started describing Izuku. There was a boy, plain face with freckles. He had curly green hair, and I think his name is Midoriya Izuku. Present Mike looked intrigued, and she continued. I was wondering if maybe I could give him some of my points. Or at least the points he lost because he saved me instead. The video paused. And All Might spoke again. You spurred others to act. The entrance exam was not graded only on villain points after all. All Might filled the screen again. How could a hero course reject people who save others and do the right thing? This means rescue points. Izuku was thoroughly shocked. He had only guessed that they would grant points for helping others. You were a difficult student to grade, you know? It almost looked like a miracle each time an examinee didn't get hurt, but for all the trouble you gave us, it showed us it was worth it for a hero like you. You got 85 points, and for Uraraka Achiko, 45 points. All Might was looking over his shoulder now, all dramatic like. You both pass. He turned around to continue. Come, young Midoriya. This is your Hero Academia. He saw the leaderboard, which looked like this. Rank student villain points, rescue points. 1 Midoriya Izuku, 5085. 2 Bakugo Katsuki, 7080. 3 Kirishima Ijiro, 3935. For Uraraka Achiko, 2845. 5 Shiozaki Ibara, 3632. 6 Kendo Itsuka, 2540. 7 Ida Tinya, 529. 8 Tetsu 4910. 9 Tokoyami Fumikage, 4710. 10 Aways Yosetsu, 56. If Izuku was lightly sobbing before, he was now racked with relief and his clothes were drenched in tears. Hearing his crying, his mother uncharacteristically barged into his room, ready to comfort her son. After she saw the smile on his face, though, she stopped at the door and started up her own waterworks. They celebrated heavily that night and invited Uraraka and Now, which was when they found out Now had made it in too. The next night, Mr. Yagi asked Izuku to meet him at the beach. Mr. Yagi, he called to the older man. Mr. Yagi was stood facing the sea, but turned to Izuku when he heard his voice. He held up his right hand in a gesture to high five. Congrats on passing. A slap of their hands, and the small celebration was over. Before Izuku could say anything, though, the blonde man continued. You should know that I haven't told the school about our relationship. And I wasn't a judge. You seemed like the type to worry about favoritism. I appreciate it, Izuku said quietly. Now, young Midoriya, for as long as I've known you, you've been desperate to know how fast you can go, yes? Izuku nodded, so Mr. Yagi continued. Well, according to Nizu's rough calculations, you sit at around Mach 4.4. Now I know that may be a little desap. He stopped at Izuku's frozen expression. His eyes were wide, and his mouth was moving as if he were talking, but nothing came out. Young Midoriya, are you okay? After a few more seconds of soundless mouth moving, Izuku finally responded with a loud yes, which caught the attention of a couple standing on the nearby boardwalk to the beachside viewing platform built a ways offshore. He quickly apologized to them before he started rambling to Mr. Yagi. I knew I was faster than sound without one for all, but to think it more or less tripled my top speed is nothing short of amazing. But that's just 15%. Does that make one for all act as an enhancer via percentile rather than at a fixed quantity? If so, is it exponential or is it linear? Regardless, this changes how I need to plan out special moves. I wonder what output is needed to. Kid Mr. Yagi brought him out of his muttering storm. Izuku gasped and apologized to him for muttering again. It's no problem, but try to work on that habit. I know it probably helps organize your thoughts, but if you were to do it in front of a villain, that'd work against you. Izuku nodded resolutely. Mr. Yagi nodded in return. Now get on home. I don't want your mother to be the reason I retire. Izuku giggled, and with a minute puff of sand, he was gone. On the letter that came with the projection disc, it gave him some very important information. Information such as what class he was in, where the dormitory is, and when he should move into the dormitory. There was also a form for him to fill out detailing what his costume would consist of. He was originally going to go for a design heavily based on All Might, but after some rather inspiring words from Now, he changed it. The first issue came when he had to return to school. He only really had to be there as a formality, leading up to his graduation day, but his mom wouldn't let him free of it anyways. This led to more than a few cases of him getting praised and insulted all at once. He didn't mind, though, since there weren't any other people that made it in other than Katsuki and Nao. Though, a few other girls tried to catch Nao alone so they could congratulate her. Of course, Izuku made sure there weren't any issues. He decided that, in case the dormitory had a kitchen, he wanted to be able to prepare a snack or a small meal. Plus, he didn't really expect the staff to cook 3 meals a day for the whole student body. That'd be ridiculous. So he took some lessons from his mother and learned a few recipes, and was even given a copy of her personal recipe book. He vowed to memorize and be able to prepare every meal in the book before the end of the year. His biggest issue for the move-in, though, was deciding what hero merchandise to take and what to leave behind. He wanted to take enough to satisfy his need to admire them, but not too much that he looks like some weird or creepy otaku. He even enlisted the help of his mom, Nao and Uraraka, who hadn't even seen his room yet. That was an experience, for sure. He ended up taking a couple All Might posters and figurines, all of his Maruko and Ingenia merchandise, and the one singular piece of merch from a mysteriously retired hero called a clock. He managed to fit it all into a single box, without damaging anything. It took 3 more boxes to get everything else he thought he'd need for school, and anything that didn't fit into the boxes went into his backpack and duffel bag. He had to wait, though, until his mom got home so she could help him take his stuff over to UA. They offered to help now, but in a rare act of kindness, her parents hired movers to take her stuff for her. Uraraka's did the same. It wasn't until 5 o'clock in the evening until he got to the dorms. He unloaded the boxes to the ground behind the car and walked over to the driver's car door to say his goodbyes to his mother. "Bye, Mom. Please don't go dying of loneliness while I'm gone, all right?" He was joking, but he knew that her living alone would hit her hard. "Very funny, young man. You don't go having kids, all right? I do want grandbabies, but wait until you've..." "MOM," she chuckled. "Make sure to call at least once a week, all right?" He nodded. "Okay, sweetie, I'll go now. Bye." He watched her drive away for a minute, before turning to the small pile of boxes. "Now then, let's get you inside, shall we?" He smiled as he picked up the boxes and walked to his dorms. He was excited to meet his new classmates. Everyone had the same idea of getting there as early as possible. Kyoka just sat on one of the large couches in the dorm rec room and watched TV with a few other students. She had already gotten acquainted with all the girls in her class, though she wouldn't really consider them friends yet. There was one guy with glasses who seemed to have a stick so far up his ass he had 2 spines, waiting for the final student to arrive. Some guy named Midoriya or something. It was just after 5, though, when the front doors to the door opened and a bunch of boxes with legs walked in. Never mind, it was just a guy carrying all of those boxes. Holy shit, how strong is he? She wasn't the only one watching now. The other girls were too, clearly interested in the person that can carry boxes that easily weigh more than 100 kilos together. "Oh man, am I the last one here?" the guy asked. Apparently, he's the Midoriya dude everyone was waiting on. He was dressed pretty casual, with light brown cargo shorts, red high tops, and a novelty shirt with dress shirt on it. He had dark green hair and bright green eyes. "Yes, you should try to be more strict with your timing, glasses," said sternly. "On engines, you're the guy that tried to tell me off. They know each other? I wanted to talk to you about your quirk. It's pretty similar to mine." "That can wait. Would you like some assistance with setting up your room?" Glasses said robotically, as if he was made instead of born. "Nah, just give me a couple of seconds and I'll be back down." And with that, the new guy disappeared, along with all his boxes. Then, not long after, he was back and holding a notebook with a pencil in hand. He was rapid-fire asking questions, so fast that Kyoka wasn't sure anyone could actually understand the guy. Glasses couldn't even get a word in as question after question poured out of his mouth. Her enhanced hearing picked up a vibrating sound, probably someone's phone. Green stopped his torrent of questions and reached into his pocket to grab his phone. He clearly had a back and forth with someone, since he had been tapping on his screen for a few seconds at a time. The whole exchange up until that point from when he reappeared wasn't even a minute. Kyoka looked around the room to the other girls and could see Tsu barely stopping herself from salivating. The other girls weren't much better, though Kyoka couldn't really tell with Hagakure since she was invisible. She turned back to where Green and Glasses were having their little conversation, only to see the Green was no longer there, and Glasses was standing around looking dumbfounded. "Who was that?" she asked, just loud enough that she knew Glasses had heard her. "Our final classmate to arrive, Midoriya Izuku. He apparently has left to help a friend in the general education course move in. He will be back shortly." Or so he said. He sounded like he didn't believe it. She definitely didn't either. She turned back to face the television, so she could take her mind off the fact that most of her classmates were super fucking weird. Shortly after she turned back to the TV, there was thumping coming from the stairs on the girls' side of the dorm as someone ran down them. Eventually emerged the brunette Kyoka had come to know as Uraraka. "Damn it," she yelled. "What?" Glasses asked, sounding somewhat worried. "I missed Midoriya. He said we'd meet up and hang out," the girl cried out. "Hang out? They know each other too?" "You know each other?" He sounded intrigued. "Yeah, I had dinner at his place after the exam course. He saved me. We became friends after that," she stated, sounding kind of proud. "What the hell? He left just a few seconds ago." "Oh, so he'll be back soon, then I'll wait here for him." Uraraka walked over to the nearest empty spot on the couch and plopped herself down. She eyed the door carefully, clearly looking out for when Midoriya came back. Though, she had to admit herself, she was interested in the guy considering he'd only been here for 2 minutes, if even that, and he'd already done some weird stuff. "Is that good enough?" Izuku asked, exasperated at all the furniture moving now and her dorm mates were making him do. "I get the feeling they have ulterior motives, but I can't even think of anything they could get out of this. Other than a new look to their living room, of course." In the end, the guys in the dorm chased him out, sounding all flustered. There was one guy, though, with lilac-colored hair, who seemed to look at him with utter hatred. Izuku had no clue what that guy's problem was, but he made a mental note to ask Now about him later. The last thing he saw was all the girls, including Now, giggling as they watched him walk out of the building. He stopped right outside the doors to catch his breath. He couldn't see it as he did it, but when he ran back to his dorm, all the jaws of the Class 1C students, sans Now, practically hit the floor. He couldn't help but smile as he remembered what Mr. Yagi told him his top speed was. Mach 4.4. His mind was still reeling over that fact. He barely felt the air part as he ran. He decided to do one quick test of his quirk and jumped. He rose into the air and peaked before he fell. It didn't seem any different to if he jumped from normal, but the thing was, he was doing it at super speed, which meant he had more emitter abilities than he thought. Could I classify all the recorded effects under inertia? No, not the gravity. Is that maybe minor gravity manipulation? What would happen if Uraraka used her quirk on me then? I have to test this as soon as possible. Before he had realized, though, he was back at the dorm. Not even 1 minute after he'd set up his room, Xenotation Spot asked a guy about his quirk without giving him the chance to answer. Xenotation Spot moved the furniture in the Class 1C dorm around at the girl's request. Xenotation Spot pissed of one particular guy in Class 1C without actually doing anything to him. Xenotation Spot gotten kicked out of the Class 1C dorm by the boys for a reason unknown. Xenotation Spot found out his quirk has more capabilities than he first thought. Overall, his evenings so far had been quite packed. His favorite part, though, would be finding out everyone in his class's quirks. When he first walked in, he saw engines from the entrance exam. Then he saw a girl with cool as earlobes. He really wanted to talk to her about the logistics of her quirk. He walked through the doors and clearly wasn't paying attention because he was caught off guard when something small slammed into him. He stumbled slightly before he looked down and saw the back of Uraraka's head. "Hey Uraraka, you met everyone else yet? Any cool quirks?" She looked up from where she was burying her face in his gut and pouted. "You didn't ask me how I was. What sort of a friend are you?" She asked rhetorically in fake indignation before she smiled. "I've only met the girls and Ida over there. Listen to this, there's this one girl that's envious." "Midoriya, I see you've returned." Uraraka was rudely interrupted by the now named Ida. "I believe official introductions are in order. I am Ida. How about we do it as a whole class?" Izuku interrupted. He phrased it as a question, but the way he said it left no room for argument. Izuku leaned a little to his left to look behind Ida, and on the couches in the dorm living room saw 4 girls. Wait, no, there's some floating clothes that have a very distinct shape of well endowment on the shirt. 5 girls then. Ida seemed irked at first for being interrupted, but quickly seemed to brighten up in a way only a robot could as he agreed to the idea. He left to get all the boys from the boys' side of the dorm. Izuku walked over to the couches and sat as far away as he could from the girls. It wasn't that he hated them, he was just a little nervous around them. Boys started to trickle in, and each took up a spot in the living room. Izuku swore he could hear Katsuki yelling, but thought it was his mind playing tricks on him. Soon enough, there were 18 other people in the room. Izuku looked around and saw the guy with 6 arms and barely managed to keep himself from running over and bombarding the absolutely gargantuan boy. There was an awkward silence until one of the girls, who had pink skin, matching hair, and 2 small horns, jumped up from her spot on the couch. Okay, so we're going to go around and introduce ourselves. We'll say our name, our quirk, and something you like. She looked around the room to see if anyone had anything to say, but when no one said anything, she continued. I'm Ashido Mina. My quirk is acid, and I like dancing. She threw one of her hands in the air and hopped onto one leg when she finished. Clearly, she was the happy-go-lucky type of person. Her quirk was what Izuku paid the most attention to, though, after her name. Could she change the concentration? What about the vis? A poke to his cheek got his attention. You were doing it again, Uraraka said plainly. He smiled sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head. Thankfully, someone else decided to introduce themselves. I'm Yaoyorozu Momo. My quirk is creation and I like to read. Izuku could barely hold back his muttering. What did her quirk entail, based on that name alone? Izuku was also grateful that the introductions got on swiftly. The girls minus Uraraka all went first. After Yaoyorozu, it was Jiro Kyoka whose quirk was earphone jack. The girl seemed to be trying to act cool, but Izuku heard the nervousness in her voice. Her quirk was super interesting to Izuku though, since it was still weird that technology managed to find its way into the human genome. Hagakure Toru, who was invisible. She was extremely expressive, using her body to show her emotions. It was probably because people couldn't see her face. And finally Azuitsu, whose quirk was frog. She seemed very calm, and said she always spoke her mind. She also said to call her Tsu, which seemed very much like her. Next went the guys. Shoji Mizo was the guy who had 6 arms, and he called it dupli arms, which meant there was more to it. Izuku didn't notice it until it went away, but Shoji had transformed one of his hands into a mouth to speak. Kaminari Denki was kind of an airhead, but his quirk electrification made up for it a bit. Shiro Hanta was plain, but he had odd-shaped elbows, which was apparently because of his quirk, tape. Mineta Minoru was the one Izuku hated the most, because the guy kept giving the girls dirty looks, and not even his quirk pop-off could make up for it. Kota Koji was bulky, but ultimately seemed shy, and his quirk on knee voice definitely caught Izuku's interest, like all command-type quirks did. Ojiro Mashireo almost seemed more invisible than Hagakure, since a bird-headed boy almost talked over him. Ojiro's quirk was pretty obvious though, being a rather muscular-looking tail. Izuku's avian-headed classmate from before introduced himself as Tokoyami Fumikage and didn't really give a name for his quirk, instead saying a demon of darkness lived within him. Ida Tenya, the guy with engines in his legs, was very robotic and a pain. His only redeeming quality was his quirk, as far as Izuku was concerned. Kirishima Ijiro had fiery red hair and a personality to match. He seemed sort of disappointed when he said his quirk, hardening, like he didn't like it, despite the fact it was one of the more versatile quirks Izuku had seen in the past. The aloof Todoroki Shudo was next, and his quirk half-hot, half-cold definitely got Izuku's attention. It sucked that the next words out of the classmate's mouth was that he refused to use the fire half of his quirk. Guess studying that part of it would have to wait. In contrast, was the sparkly boy from the exam, Aoyama Yuga. His quirk naval laser was interesting enough. His personality was off-putting though, and a bit suffocating with all the sparkles he was somehow giving off. And it was Sato Rikito's turn, whose quirk Sugar Rush somehow seemed to fit the guy who looked like a brawler. He had a sweet personality, so maybe that's what it was that worked. Then Uraraka decided to finally introduce herself. Izuku already knew her, so he wrote in his notebook instead, theorizing about his classmates' quirks based on their names alone. It took a slap to the face and almost literally getting sent flying by Uraraka to get his attention so he could introduce himself. Sorry, he apologized, not for the first time that evening. He quickly checked the time and saw it had somehow already been half an hour since they'd started. Oh, well, my name is Midoriya Izuku, as some of you may know. I like to analyze heroes and quirks, and my own quirk is Super Speed. Izuku tried to finish sounding confident, but the complete and utter silence that followed his introduction was nerve-wracking. Eventually, Kaminari asked bluntly, "So you're a little faster than normal?" "That's it." Izuku sighed. Jiro moved to stab him in the ear, but before she could, Izuku was holding the cord-like earlobe in between his fingers, standing next to Kaminari. "More than a little," was all he said, trying to act cool. Kaminari jumped away from him and into Zero. Jiro forcefully pulled back her earphone jack, and just like everyone else, Sans Uraraka had wide eyes. Even Todoroki and Tsuyu. The first to recover was Yaoyorozu, who asked, "You seem to be more than a little faster than normal, Midoriya. Do you happen to know your top speed?" Izuku was thoroughly red in the face with embarrassment from putting himself in the spotlight. "Oh well, my trainer tested it a little while ago, and he said it was a little over Mach 4. He spoke softly, not wanting the attention to stay on him. There was a collective gasp at that revelation, including from Uraraka, who he had yet to tell his top speed to, along with Now. He looked around, and there were many looks of astonishment, but also a few of confusion. Again, the first person to speak was Yaoyorozu. "What are the logistics behind that? You'd leave a lot of destruction behind yourself, wouldn't you?" "Yeah, but I obviously have some passive emitter abilities which work to ensure that doesn't happen. I even found out recently that I might have minor gravity manipulation, 'cause I fall faster when I go super speed." Yaoyorozu had a thoughtful expression. "Try not to think too hard about it. I don't think it makes sense either." He let out a defeated sigh. "Wait, does that mean I'll never hear you coming?" It was Jiro. He looked to her, and then thought about it. "Probably. Since I have super speed, I think even people who could see the future wouldn't be able to stop me. You need to try to get me to run into a wall, or trip me up, or completely obliterate me." And thinking about Aoyama's quirk, he gestured lazily to the boy. "Even if his laser shoots out light, at light speed, I'd still be able to defeat him easily. Quirks like his have a charge-up time, and he would still need to send the signal to activate his quirk. Then redirecting it would be much slower than I could move." He stopped when he realized he was rambling. "Sorry." He apologized. "Again." "What for?" "That was a very good analysis," Midoriya Ida said. "Really? Most people call it creepy." "How so?" "I believe it is important to have that sort of skill, even if it does put you at risk of leaking information to villains nearby," Yaoyorozu said encouragingly. "Trust me, I'm working on it." He sighed again, but before anyone else could say anything, he perked up and asked, "Do we have a kitchen?" "Yes, we do," Ida thankfully supplied. A true gentleman, even if it wasn't his intention. "Then I'm going to cook something. Anyone want anything?" He looked around the room, and immediately everyone brightened up, despite the already bright look some of them had. Izuku saw a very busy time ahead of himself. A few of classmates offered help, but he declined, wanting to show off a bit. They all went to bed at a reasonable time, and Izuku had completely skipped over the fact there was still an unknown member in their class. But that didn't really matter, since he had a whole weekend still before the first day, and he really wanted to get some analysis done for his classmates' quirks. He was so excited. Chapter 7. Stepping into a Hero's Future. He opened his eyes to the unfamiliar ceiling that is, his UA dormitory bedroom ceiling. He turned to his side to look at his alarm clock. 9:33 a.m. Still kind of early for a Saturday, but he didn't think he'd be able to go back to sleep, so he got up and made sure he was wearing somewhat presentable clothing. He walked out of his room quietly, not for any particular reason. He shut his door and made his way to the stairs. He walked down cautiously, still being sort of half asleep. He was abruptly thrust into full consciousness, though, when a lovely aroma met his nostrils. He raced his way down the rest of the stairs and into the kitchen, and found Sato making pancakes. "Whoa, I didn't know you could cook," was all he said as he approached the counter behind the taller student. "Oh yeah, it helps with my quirk sort of," was all he said before going silent. "That reminds me, what does your quirk do?" Izuku asked after a while. Sato quickly finished what he was doing before he turned around with a contemplative look on his face. "I'm not the brightest guy, so my explanation might suck." Izuku nodded for him to continue. "So, as the name implies, I eat sugar and I get stronger. Somehow, Izuku had a notebook and was furiously writing notes. Is there a quantity requirement? How much stronger do you get? What are the side effects? He asked them almost too fast for the larger boy to catch. I need to eat 10 grams of sugar at least to activate my quirk. From there, every 10 grams makes me 5 times stronger. He stopped when he looked down and saw Izuku had filled 2 pages of notes somehow and was flipping over to a new one. And I get dumber each time. Izuku stopped. Dumber how? Do you literally get dumber? Or do you become more animalistic? Sato seemed a little stunned at that. People normally accepted what he said and left it at that. I think the doctor said something about a decrease in cognitive function or something. I don't really know what it means other than I get dumber. The boy said eventually. I see. Very interesting. What's the time limit? 3 minutes for every 10 grams of sugar. His classmate was back to making pancakes. Izuku only just realized it, but there was quite a large amount of them. He counted the plates. 18, 19, 20. Did you make pancakes for everyone? Izuku whisper yelled, remembering that there was still a large amount of people asleep. Yeah? Hey, can you help me get everyone up? He thought about it for a moment. Sure. Izuku ended up sitting next to the very quiet and shy Koda. Izuku remembered how he mumbled out his introduction the previous night and wondered if maybe he preferred sign language or just not talking in general. Hey, Koda. The boy jumped in surprise, as if he wasn't expecting Izuku to talk to him. He didn't say anything and just turned to look at Izuku. He had an unsure look on his face. Do you know sign language? A nod. Do you have a book on sign language I could borrow? Another nod. Izuku was about to ask another question, but the bulky boy was out of his seat and running to his room before he could. He received a few pointed looks from his classmates for scaring off Koda, but it wasn't like that was Izuku's intention. When Koda came back a minute later, it was with a book in his hands, and he was slightly out of breath, as if he had run the whole way there and back. The boy spotted Izuku still sitting at the counter, eating pancakes, and walked over. Once he was close enough, he bowed his head a little and sort of thrust the book at Izuku. He grabbed the book and gave a small thanks before he decided to give it a quick read. He was quite intrigued with the language, and reading the book, it made him upset he hadn't bothered to learn it earlier. It took him some time, but once he was finished he closed it and handed it back, much to the surprise of Koda and their classmates. Thank you. I've memorized everything. I should be able to understand you, though I don't think I can quite do it myself yet. Izuku smiled. He received a curt nod and a small smile in return. He looked to his classmates who were still staring at him, presumably in awe. Did I say something weird? Midoriya, are you sure you managed to read all of that? If so, then you have made an endeavor that will leave you unmatched, for you finished it in under 5 minutes. Tokoyami said, the disbelief in his voice on par with his strange, but slightly endearing, personality and speech patterns. Really? Wow. I guess I need to up my game then. Though, I really want to talk with Koda, and yes/no questions don't exactly work so well. They seemed to get what he was saying, but still couldn't get over the sheer speed his quirk granted him apparently. Koda sat back down, placing the book next to his mostly empty plate of food. So what did you want to talk about? He asked. I was wondering if you could tell me about your quirk. I assumed it's a command/control type, but I'd like to hear it from you. Izuku watched as Koda moved his hands around, signing to Izuku everything he knew about his quirk. Izuku magically had his notebook and a pencil in his hands and was writing furiously as he watched Koda talk. Izuku interjected every now and again for clarification, which Koda was happy to do. He seemed glad that someone was willing to talk to him despite his preferred method of communication. Once they were done, Izuku was thoroughly satisfied with his work. He looked around the room and realized that a significant amount of time must have passed because it was just the two of them in the kitchen and everyone was either in their rooms or in the living room playing video games. They each excused themselves and went to their rooms. Izuku made sure to look up material on sign language so he could practice it, because memory could only serve you so well. He also organized his notes that he received from Sato and Koda, so that later he could do some theorizing and potential exercises to improve themselves and their quirks. He was ecstatic and made it his goal to get everyone's quirks done by the end of the day. Izuku had a blast studying the rest of his male classmates' quirks for the rest of the day. He had at least one page of knowns for each quirk and was going to go through each at a later time, so he could theorize and plan possible improvements and the like. He really felt at home with people who didn't mind his questions. It turns out Shuji could replicate any body part, and each replicated one would have enhanced sense. He could also replicate the pods, as he called them, that allowed the replication, which basically allowed for extension of his limbs. That was all he had managed to get, but Izuku felt like there was more his class wasn't telling him. Probably wants to make sure he still has some tricks up his sleeve or something. The rest of his classmates were not so closed off, with the exception of Tokoyami. Each of them gave Izuku the ins and outs of their quirks, including their limits, drawbacks, everything they knew they told him. It was quite interesting. Though he couldn't get Todoroki to talk, which sucked, but Izuku was determined to know as much as possible about everyone's quirks. By the time he had finished, it was late afternoon, and he decided to relax. He was sitting in the living room watching television with several of his classmates. But strangely, the usual energetic girls that spent most of their time there were nowhere to be seen. Not like it mattered anyways. He was about to get up to make dinner when the girls walked in. All of them. They had a strange aura to them, one that Izuku couldn't identify. He was suspicious. "Hey boys," Ishido yelled, catching the attention of those present. With hums of curiosity, the boys stopped talking and turned to face their most energetic female classmates so far. "What is it, Ishido?" asked Kaminari. "Us girls were talking, and we were thinking, how about we have a dorm room showcase?" She finished excitedly. "I'll pass. I've already seen the guys' rooms," Izuku said quickly. Ishido's response was to pout, which was, admittedly, adorable. "Can we at least see your room first then? And what about the girls' rooms?" asked Mineta, who seemed to have something against Izuku. "Sure." He got up and walked to his room. As he put his hand on the doorknob, he gave a warning. "Heads up, I'm a bit of a hero nerd. This warning is more for you than me, but just thought I'd let you know." They all had confused faces, but seemed to accept it nonetheless. He opened the door to reveal his room, and there was complete silence as his classmates walked in. Several minutes passed as they inspected his belongings, thankfully not looking through his closet or anywhere that contained more private items. Ishido was the one to break the silence. "It really is a hero otaku room," which received many hums of agreement from his classmates. Izuku, unbeknownst to his classmates, was very steadily growing embarrassed. The moment they hit the 5-minute mark, Izuku forced them out. Though, there was one who clearly wasn't paying attention. Jiro, if Izuku remembered correctly, had her back to him and was looking down slightly. It was as if she was reading something. "Oh my God, is that my notebook?" He snatched the object away from her and promptly started to push her towards the door as gently as he could. He slammed his door shut and apologized under his breath, not expecting her to hear him. He waited several minutes before he left his room to make dinner, which he did on autopilot. He didn't notice the pair of eyes that tracked him on his way out of his room. It was a Sunday morning, and Izuku decided he should get back into a workout routine, even if it is just a short run in the morning. So he got up at 6 a.m., got dressed into some workout clothes, and out the front door. He started some stretches before he mentally planned out his route. It took a bit, since he hadn't memorized the campus map yet, and he had yet to see most of it. So, he settled for a few laps around the first-year dorms. A few deep breaths in and out, and he was off. Time was something he never bothered to pay attention to when he went for runs, so he just went for a good 10 laps, without one for all. He knew it probably looked a little odd, since things tend to blur when they go fast enough, but he couldn't care less. He hadn't realized you couldn't run around the back of the dorms, so he only ended up doing a back and forth between each end, from 1A to 1K and back. He estimated it was about 250 meters, plus the return trip made for a 500, so he was going to run quite the measly 2.5 kilometers. Working with his top speed at an estimated max of Mach 2, it was approximately a 4-second run. It was probably longer since his top speed isn't quite Mach 2, but it's probably still around 4.5 seconds. He was back in the dorm soon enough, not even tired or sweaty. He noticed Ida on his way out, presumably also for a run. "Midoriya, are you out for a run as well?" "Actually, I just finished. I only ran about 2.5 kilometers. Izuku walked past the now stunned Ida and back to his room. Izuku relaxed for a while, and was trying to build up the courage to go to the girls and ask them about their quirks. Sure, he had been friends with Now for a while, and Uraraka since the exam, but that's only two people he was panicking more in that moment than he had ever before in his life. Conveniently, a knock at his door interrupted him. He opened it to see Uraraka standing patiently. He smiled at the familiar face. Hey Uraraka, what's up? I came to ask if you were going to eat breakfast. I'm good, thanks. I'll eat later. If you're sure. So, what have you been doing in your room? She asked teasingly, having picked up a bit of the attitude from Now. He blushed a little, just trying to work up the courage to ask the other girls about their quirks. An unidentifiable look came on her face, before it was gone less than a second later with a mischievous grin. Is that all you want to talk to them about? If his blush was small before, it definitely wasn't now. Yes. If you say so. She sounded skeptical. Why not just go up to them and ask? It can't really be that hard, can it? Yes, it is because they're all so pee-pee pretty. He trailed off before he started talking again. And what if they're in their rooms? I don't want to bother them. Uraraka was very unimpressed. I don't think they'll mind. School hasn't even started yet. What could they possibly be busy with? Apparently, Izuku couldn't come up with an answer to that, as he just opened and closed his mouth repeatedly like a fish. Uraraka just raised an eyebrow expectantly. He gave up with a sigh and dropped his head in defeat. All right. Thanks for the help, Uraraka. I owe you one. Then call me Achiko. He looked up to her stunned, but she was just smiling. He didn't say anything and just gave a small nod. She seemed to accept that as an answer and just walked away, with a small skip in her steps. Guess I should get on with it, huh? On his trip to the girls' side of the dorms, he stopped in the living room to check if any of them were in there, and lucky enough, there were two. Ashido and Hagakure. Those two were practically stuck at the hip, and it was probably because of their shared energeticness. Hey, Ashido. Damn, my nerves are getting to me already. Yeah, Midori? Midori? Yeah, don't you like it? I guess it's fine. Moving on, I wanted to know if I could ask you some questions about your quirk. Sure, what do you want to know? You said your quirk was acid, right? A nod and a hum of approval. Can you control the viscosity and concentration of it? Also, does your appearance tie into your quirk at all? Yes, and yes, I don't know why my skin is pink really, but it does make me pretty resistant to acid, so it's alright. Can I ask you about your quirk too, Hagakure? Sure, I guess. Do you know how you're invisible? Whether light passes through you or around you. A quick no. Obviously, you can still see. But can you see yourself? A yes. Alright, and building on that, have you tried expelling light? Silence. Since you can see, and you can see yourself, light is still reaching you. So I was wondering if you could maybe, well, not quite expel it, but send it away from you? I don't know, she sounded excited. Maybe I should try that when we start our hero training. A hum of approval from Ashido. Thank you for your time. Since I'll be studying these, I can let you know if I come up with anything. A couple of loud shouts of, yeah, later, and Izuku is searching for the rest of the girls to ask them about their quirks. It was quite a nerve-wracking endeavor, since he was still pretty nervous around girls. There ended up not being much to learn about Tsu. He could barely call her that, and most of the time he just calls her Azui, much to her ire. Since like his quirk, it's a mutation type. He had already done Achiko's, so he ended up skipping her, but that meant he went straight to Yaoyorozu. Her quirk was extremely interesting, being able to turn one's fat stores into anything. It was impressive, though the requirement of needing to know the molecular makeup of the things you wanted to make was a huge drawback, but she wouldn't be there if she hadn't worked hard. Izuku ended up finding out that her fat stores are a bit denser than most people's, and her quirk also does the fat-to-item conversion with extreme efficiency. It was frighteningly powerful. Conveniently, he had enough space left in his notebook for his classmates for one more person. Last one. Jiro. Damn, he messed up yesterday. He just shoved her out of his room. There's no way she'll agree to telling him about her quirk. Just as he was about to knock, he heard something on the other side. It sounded like music. It was good. Beautiful even. He shook himself out of his stupor to avoid looking like a dolt, and knocked. The music stopped the moment he did, and after some rather worrying sounds, the door opened. What? She asked angrily, but when she saw his face, she slammed the door in it. Okay, Discouraged, Izuku turned to walk away, but was stopped when the door opened again. Sorry, I was surprised. What do you want? She was much calmer now, though the agitation from before was still there. I just came to ask if you could tell me about your quirk. I just really like documenting quirks, and ones like yours, centered around human technology, always interest me the most. I understand if you. Okay. I thought so. Wait, what? Sure. I can tell you about my quirk if you want. It's not like anything super personal or something. Izuku swore he heard her say something else under her breath, but didn't pay it much attention. All right then, so are your earphone jacks extendable? If so, how far can they extend? Can you control whether you input and output sound through them? What's their penetrating power? Are they completely prehensile, or is that something you're working on? Do you have regular enhanced hearing? Can they provide enhanced hearing? Whoa dude, one question at a time. She put her hands up defensively. Sorry. He rubbed the back of his head, and unknowingly, the short sleeves of his shirt revealed his biceps which flexed with the motion. Thus, he was confused when Jiro had a strange look on her face, which he couldn't identify. You look weird standing out there. Here, she stepped to the side as she opened her door wider to let him in. Once he was inside, he got a good look at the rather extensive music-based decor of the room. It was sort of endearing, considering the mostly aloof appearance the girl had kept up since they'd met, which admittedly wasn't that long ago. All right. I also wanted to apologize for yesterday. I just shoved you out of my room. He stared down at the floor in embarrassment. Nah, I get it. You probably didn't want anyone reading those books without asking. Now, didn't you want to know about my quirk? She walked over to her bed and dropped down onto it, positioning herself comfortably. Right so, on Friday, you went to stab Kaminari. I noticed that your earphone jacks got longer. Is there a maximum range to it? 6 meters. How strong are they? If you mean how much I can lift, probably not that much. I haven't tested that. Scribbles. How much penetrative power do you have? I cracked the robots from the entrance exam a little, but I can definitely stab them into concrete. How prehensile are they? I can throw darts with them. Do you have enhanced hearing? A little. I presume you can plug your jacks into devices, but is there an output? If so, can you utilize this at all? Yeah, my heartbeat gets sent out if I want. I have a part of my hero costume, which is a pair of speakers, and they amp it up to weaponize it. Izuku nodded as he scribbled it. I can also use it to get info and stuff when I plug them into walls. That's so cool. You'd be the perfect hero for ranged reconnaissance. It'd also be super difficult to sneak up on you, man. Everyone else has such amazing quirks. I'm jealous. Dude. What? Her tone did not portray her words as a question, but as a statement. What? You literally run faster than sound, and I have the cool quirk? You could beat everyone in the class before any of us even had time to breathe. Well, yeah, but I still have to run into a building to get info, which is risky, and my combat options are limited to physical contact, which can work against me when the enemy has a quirk like Kirishima's hardening, and it leaves me in their range too. Dude, those points are all moot. They mean literally nothing with how fast you can go. I bet you can even run on water and up walls. Well, I haven't tested running on water, but I can run up walls. See, not so useless. You have no reason to be jealous of me or anyone else. If anything, we should be jealous of you. What? No, 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 your quirks are perfect. You literally learned sign language in less than a second just yesterday morning. There's literally nothing you can't do. Well, I can't learn to speak languages like that, since I have to hear them said, then practice them by saying them, which doesn't work at super speeds. It also means I can't learn instruments. Okay, I guess you have a point. But that last one isn't so hard to work around. Just get someone to teach you or something. Izuku took a look around her room and saw the wide variety of instruments around several guitars. He didn't know the differences of a drum kit and a keyboard. How about you? No way. Well, you have all these instruments, so you've got to know how to play them at least, right? At least a little. Oh well, I guess. If you don't want to, I won't force you. Thanks for telling me about your quirk. I'll go now. Izuku turned and walked to the door. Just as he got there, though, Jiro stopped him. I don't think I'm that good, but if you'd like, I guess I could teach you how to play guitar. Or something. He instantly brightened up and had one of the brightest smiles he's ever had on his face. "All right, are Fridays okay?" She nodded while she poked the ends of her jacks together, out of embarrassment likely. Not that he knew that. He left and made his way to his room, happy about everything he had achieved throughout the day. Having learned from his run the previous morning, Izuku tripled his distance. It was once again a short run, but it was sort of difficult to plan them. He sort of wished he had someone to run with, which of course he could ask Ida, but then he'd be going much slower than he could. Regardless, he finished and got into his uniform before he was back in the dorm kitchen preparing breakfast for everyone, including the mystery student of his class he has yet to meet somehow. He finished his own breakfast and finished preparing for classes that day, and with Achiko at his side, made his way to class. They had made it to class soon after Ida, who was vehemently lecturing everyone on punctuality. There were 10 minutes to the start of class when most of everyone was in their seats, waiting mostly in silence. The door opened, and in came the final student of 1A. Bakugo fucking Katsuki. The universe seemed to have something against Izuku, because there would otherwise be no way he would be in the same class as Katsuki. "What the fuck are you doing here, Deku?" Of course he singles me out of everyone in the class. "I'm a student of UA. You knew that already, didn't you?" That was apparently the wrong thing to say, because he started making explosions in his palms as he angrily walked towards Izuku from the door. Thankfully, he was stopped when a very tired, very angry voice stopped him. "If you're here to beat up your fellow classmates, you can leave now." The class stopped and looked to the still open door to see a yellow caterpillar on the floor. Immediately after, though, it rolled over to reveal the face of a very tired, long-haired hobo-esque man. A zipping sound and a soft grunt of effort later, and the caterpillar has been revealed to be a regular hobo-looking man in a black shirt and matching pants, topped off with a very large-looking gray scarf. "I'm Aizawa Shoyuta, your homeroom teacher." "Homeroom teacher?" He reached into his, now revealed to be, sleeping bag and pulled out a UA gym uniform. Sort of weird, but he had only been so since his first appearance. "Get changed into your gym clothes and head out to the grounds. Quickly now." Chapter 8. Battle for the Ranks. Most of everyone was out on the field, standing in a group in front of their hobo-inspired pro-hero homeroom teacher. Quiet chatter ran from student to student as they waited for the last of their classmates to arrive. Still, no one had any idea what they were supposed to be doing out here, but who were they to disobey the orders of their teacher? Once everyone was there, the tired man spoke. "Now, we're going to be doing a Quirk assessment test." "What about the entrance ceremony? Or the guidance sessions?" Achiko called out. "If you're training to become heroes, you don't have time to waste on pointless things like that." He turned and walked to what looked like a throwing pitch, the kind used for physical assessment tests from middle school. He turned his head around to give the students a rather intimidating sidelong look as he continued. "UA is known for its freestyle education system. This applies to us teachers as well." Mr. Aizawa looked straight ahead again, hiding his face from view and dimming his voice's volume a little. Softball throwing, the standing long jump, the 50-meter dash, endurance running, side-to-side stepping, sit-ups, and the seated toe touch. You did all those in middle school, yes? Your standard no quirks allowed gym tests. The first thought on everyone's mind was that this guy was straight to the point and took no shit. The second was that he was being really dramatic. Conveniently for their over-the-top teacher, there was practically no wind to ruin the mood he was trying to set. He was facing them again and continued his